behind the blue wall. Live on Twitch. We're live on YouTube. Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And after 400 of these, I still can flub the opening. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
Well, listen, on this podcast, we talk about games, but on this podcast, okay, we're gonna talk about everything, I guess. This is episode 400. This is the big episode 400. Spectacular. I did not trim my beard for it. I am
Neither did I.
as I'm now looking at myself. And I guess that you know what that means. Listen, we've done 200 episode spectaculars at this point, one of which was 5 hours long, which we're theoretically not looking to preserve, but who knows, anything's possible, right? Where we solicit questions from you, our beautiful listeners, and we answer them one after another, and we have a gazillion questions to get through.
Lou in the chat says you should have had matching beards for this occasion, and Lord Interior is mad that Lou got the first chat off, but this is how it's going to work. I think we will take priority on live questions if they get posted, okay. But if there is not a live question, we will pull a posted question. Do you have one you want to pull right now, or should we?
Let's just start from. Do you want to start from the top? You and I have been cataloging these questions in our DMs, so we can start from the top, or we can start from the bottom.
Let's start from the top of the DMs, and then we'll work into maybe some of the emails too.
Okay. Okay, well, question number one, this comes from Nova, our good friend Nova, a WoW friend of ours. Nova asks, question for your AMA, what is your most rewarding interaction in a video game and why? And I had a really chintzy answer to this when I first thought about it, but I think my real answer is probably much different and more sort of mean and fucked up, to be honest with you. And I think I've talked about this on the cast before. Because the real answer is that it's like beating the crap out of somebody in like a PvP game, just like absolutely like owning somebody when you're playing like some PvP, some PvP title. The true answer that I have on my brain is in League of Legends. Okay, we played that game mode Clash, right? In the very first Clash that ever came out, Clash is this game mode where you play a little mini tournament arc, right? Where you and another team, you do a best of 3, and there's like a little like tournament structure or whatever. And in our first Clash game with our first like Clash team, okay, I was playing mid lane, and in the first game, they banned out Yasuo because it was my most played champion, right? And then in the second game, they let Yasuo through. Okay, so we first picked Yasuo for me in the mid lane, right? And then they clearly thought that they had a counter to it, and they had this whole sort of strategy to sort of counter Yasuo, and it didn't matter. I dominated. I absolutely destroyed that whole game. They surrendered. They surrendered, I think, at 20 on that game, which is pretty crazy for sort of like a Clash experience. And I do famously hate League of Legends and think it's a bad game and all of the other stuff that I've said on this podcast. But that feeling, okay, of having a main, right? Being in an environment where somebody knows you have a main, them disrespecting the fact that you have their main, that you have a main by letting it go through, them setting up a counter to your main that does not work, and then you dominating with your main is like, that's like the 5-step process to the most satisfying interaction I think I've ever had in any video game ever in my life.
I definitely feel that, and mine's definitely somewhat similar. So, what is it? This is for me in Street Fighter, and there's two things. One, just edging out a victory, I do think is more satisfying than a blowout. But the one that really, really makes me like feel good inside is, I play Zangief, as most people know. In most Street Fighter games, Zangief has a long ultimate that's like a big grab animation, right? And every once in a while, someone will disconnect in the middle of that grab animation. And just the knowledge that I have frustrated them out that much that they've disconnected is just like, oh, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that.
Yeah.
So,
Martin in the chat says some people logging to relax and play with friends, and Buddy out here logging in to ruin someone's day. That is the kind of what both of our answers are. You know, I've done this a million times in Hearthstone, right? Like putting the perfect counterplay in like Hearthstone feels the exact same way, right? I used to play that. I talked about my incredible run to Legend with that spell hunter deck that I had made, and one of the cards in it was a secret that, you know, if somebody plays a if somebody plays a spell, it bounces back to their hand, and it costs 1 more mana for them to play it again. And I played against a druid, where I was able to use that, or I mean, it was actually a mage. I played a mage where I was able to use that when they were about to use a 10 mana spell, and it's just like you know, like when you get the read and you just can blow someone out of the water, like that's the stuff that feels good. That's maybe the fucked up answer, but you know what? Hey, it's the answer I've got. Okay, it's the answer.
No, you got to be true to yourself, right? You got to be.
Okay.
All right.
Question number 2. This one comes from the chat. This one comes from Mard. What's the best boss encounter out of all of the games that you have ever played?
Oh, man, best is an interesting qualifier here. Because there are ones that have been very satisfying, right? Like whenever we beat end game raid content, right? Like whenever we get like the final kill on a heroic boss, that's usually very satisfying. But I don't know if that makes it the best, right? Because, so I'm gonna have to think on that for a little while, just because there's like a lot of boss fights that I've had that have been fun, but in terms of like pure design, like in terms of like best encounter design, I don't know if I have a super strong answer for that. Do you have an answer?
The answer that I have off the top of my head, and to be clear, this is me answering best in terms of like raw quality that I can think of. The answer that I came up to off the top of my head is actually Estrella, the final boss in Estrella, where you are fighting kind of the twisted manifestation. Spoilers, okay, for a video game from last year that we talked about a million times. You know, you're fighting the twisted sort of corrupted version of Estrella herself, right? And that boss, you know, Estrella has these 2 phases, and she'll pop between the 2 phases given a certain number of sort of like interactions or whatever. But the thing that I think makes the Estrella boss fight so kind of satisfying to me, and why I think it's so well designed, is because it is one boss fight where I can. It's kind of like it's one boss fight that doesn't feel like I'm just designing a key for a lock, right? Which is sort of what a lot of boss fights feel like sometimes. For instance, in Elden Ring, you know, one of the things about the bosses is that they're all built to be beaten by different builds, right? Every build in the game, you know, that is somewhat reasonable should be able to beat the Elden Ring bosses, right? And a similar thing is true for sort of Estrella, right? Where, you know, you can walk into that with a different character, a different build on each of those characters, and have kind of a path to victory that is unique and complex, and that interacts with Estrella's mechanics herself in unique ways. And I just think that all of that, like that to me, is the sign of a great boss fight. It's a boss that is compelling when you do it with different, you know, like when you do it with different characters from different perspectives. And it's still just, you know, it's still just as compelling. If a boss is, you know, if a boss is fun to do one way but unfun to do every other way, then I don't think that it's a very good boss fight.
Yeah, no, I get that. Although I think there is a thing to be said for like games where where like, you know, part of the skill of the game is switching things out to beat the boss, right? Like but that depends on the game having like part of the design of the game is that you can prepare your character accordingly.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel that. Do I have a solid answer of my own? There were a couple of Destiny raids, I want to say, that,
Wow.
yeah, where like the boss, like the big fights are so complex and intricate, and require a lot of teamwork in a way that's kind of like it's they're good for the first clear. It's weird because I think after like this happens in a lot of raids, but I think it's particularly true for Destiny because it's not like World of Warcraft where you can play against yourself and get a higher DPS check or whatever.
Yeah,
or
there's no parse, right?
Yeah. And like once you kind of have the patterns down for the bosses in Destiny, I have found like second and third clears in Destiny raids to be like relatively like trivial is maybe a little too strong a word, but definitely much less difficult than the first clear. But honestly, the thing that I am thinking of clearly, and maybe just because the group of people we were playing with, but when we cleared that one of the early raids, it was like you, me, Junki, and a couple other people, probably Monic, and it was just
Nick
like, yeah,
was
Nick,
there, I think.
yeah, like throwing these balls around and like jumping into this teleporter and like shooting outside. It's just like, yeah, I think I'm gonna have to give it to that. Which is like I've played a lot of kind of single player games, but like I don't know, none of the bosses in Baldur's Gate 3 particularly did it for me. Cyberpunk, nothing in there has particularly like shown to me as a boss fight, right? Like Elden Ring, Dark Souls 3. They're nice, they're good, but like they're tough, but they don't I wouldn't call them particularly best in any way, if that makes sense. So
Yeah. I mean, honestly, a lot of that question is me just trying to figure out what's the criteria. What would I describe the best boss fight as? And yeah, so
that's fair. Yeah.
okay, interesting question. All right. The next one from our chat. Okay. This one comes from Monic. Okay, famous origin story for for some derps talk about games. Monic's first question is, what is the kindest thing you have each said to one another? If you can't recall something, you can share now. That is a good question. What's the kindest thing? Is it I'm sharing the kindest thing you've ever said about me, or I'm sharing the kindest thing I've ever said about you?
I think the right way to do this would be for you to say, like, for us to say the thing that the other person said about us, because it reflects what we thought was the was the best thing, right? Because like some of that's subjective, right? Like,
That's an interest. Yeah, that's really interesting.
yeah.
What is the nicest thing you've ever said about me? That you're willing to do this podcast for 400 episodes, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what it is. This might be one. Is that you said that Hell's Rebels was one of your favorite D&D games that you've ever played, and you because you know why. And I remember feeling very warmed. I remember feeling very touched about it at the time because it was a very off the cuff thing. Is you were talking about something else, right? And you compared it to Hell's Rebels, and I think you said something along the lines of, "But like maybe it's unfair for me to compare it to like one of the best D&D campaigns I've ever played or whatever." And I was just like, "Oh." I think it was at PAX, or maybe it was at Gen Con. I don't know. That's just because like there's something about it being like casual, right? Like and off the cuff that feels good because it's not that it's not a contrived thing.
So the thing that is popping into my head, which is it's not words, but it was the PAX right before the pandemic, and maybe I'm just remembering this because of the disaster that followed that. But I just remember walking up to you and you just giving me a great big bear hug. And, that just it's one of those things where like I don't know felt like a real friendship thing, right? Like not that it ever hasn't, but like it's one of those things like two old friends getting together. That just feels great. So that's
yeah. It would have been like 3 years or something at that point, right?
Yeah.
God, the PAX right before the PAX 2020, PAX East 2020 is when that would have been. What a wild! Look how far we've come. Okay.
Do we want to pull a question from the emails? I think we should rotate people, right? Like, because Monic has a bunch. I don't think we need to slam through all of his first.
Okay, yeah. So my thinking is that you'll do a question and then I'll do a question. We'll just bounce back and forth.
Okay,
So
I'll let you pull from the shared DMs and I'll pull from the
okay,
email.
yeah, emails, perfect. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so this one is from friend of the cast Mark, who's been on several episodes but not in a while.
That's true.
He says his question is: since the cast started, what have your biggest what have been your personal biggest perspective shifts on any of the media you've covered? I.e., maybe Mango thought chess was bad, now it's good. Buddy was more of a cake person, is now all in on pie, etc.
You know what? It's the social contract. We had an episode very early on where we kind of took two opposite ends of the social contract. But I think at this point, I'm essentially fully on sort of your side of the social contract. If we were to go back to that 2015 episode and listen to it back, I would probably agree with you more than I would agree with my past self, which is mostly a reflection of my own feelings of like essentially what I would call a skill issue, right? Like old buddy was just coping and saying I can cheat and you can't stop me, right? When the real answer is it's a skill issue, right? You know, like these are not fetters. You know, my old perspective was kind of designed around this idea that I was chained down, right, by like the rules of the social contract, right? And for folks who don't necessarily know, don't remember 9-year-old podcast episodes, the social contract explains sort of the core conceit in a D&D, like a tabletop RPG setting, where you and the GM, people will come and see the GM is God, the rule zero, whatever the GM says goes kind of thing, right? But the reality is that that's not true. There is a contract that gets entered into by players and a GM, right? So when the players enter into enter into a D&D game with a GM, there's an understanding that the GM is going to play by the rules, right? And that there is going to be some level of adherence to sort of the rules of the system, right? And that a GM who is using Rule Zero is breaking that social contract, which is a very, very dangerous sort of thing, right? Like there are obviously going to be plenty of players who are willing to default to Rule Zero, especially when it comes to ambiguities, where you sort of, you're just relying on the interpretation of certain like rules and stuff like that, where a GM is going to say, I'm not quite sure what this means, so I'm going to rule that it means this, right? Or I'm going to introduce a sort of rule to sort of adjudicate something, and it works in this kind of way. Like it's sort of like fair enough. But there's a difference between that and just like outright like changing the fabric of a D&D, like the D&D game and the sort of setting. And I think I was mostly motivated by that I wanted to do it my way, right? And I didn't like that anybody was telling me essentially no, right? Like that's kind of really what it like came down to. But at this point, I think as a GM, my philosophy has changed quite a lot towards where, protecting the social contract is paramount, but not, I would never sacrifice, what I would call to be sort of the integrity of the game or the story on the altar of the social contract, right? But I understand that like breaking the social contract, if at all, is a really awful, like bad, damaging thing to do to your players, right? And so that's probably the thing that I've moved the most on since those days.
Yeah, mine's gonna be a lot more less deep and philosophical, a lot more trite, I think. Although I will say, I think I have softened a little bit on my perspective. I think I'm a little bit more accepting of flexibility from the GM because I think it was much more absolutist in the past. But the thing I think I've had the single biggest perspective shift on is Star Wars, and this is not because of like reinterpreting anything that's there. Just kind of like, I mean, we've talked about this, right? Star Wars used to be like a really core part of my identity, and I just can't care. I can't care as much. I still like it, right? But like, I can't be that guy anymore, right? Like, that like, gets into every jot and tittle. And I think that really started with, because the more I've thought about this, the more I feel it is that when they threw the old canon into Legends, because that was just like an easy place for me to kind of like start to get off, right? Because it's like, sometimes I'll say, I think I've forgotten more about Star Wars Legends than a lot of people know about the Star Wars canon, right? Like, I might have forgotten more about Star Wars Legends than there exists of Star Wars canon. But like, just like, and every time it comes up, it's just like another little wedge. Like I've been watching through the Clone Wars with my girlfriend, and they made Hutts have sexes, which is like a little thing, but like that was always the thing that was so cool to me. It's like Hutts are hermaphroditic, and they can change like apparent gender based on where they are in their like birthing cycle. And it was weird that Jabba like liked these slave girls because all the other Hutts were like, what do you like? You know, they don't have that kind of sexual attraction. It's just like a weird thing specific to Jabba, and I thought that was neat. Watch an episode of the Clone Wars, and there's like a council of the Hutts, and they all have like a bunch of Twilight dancers. I'm like, you know, it's like what happened? It's like, oh, they and like one of the characters has a mom. It's like, oh, they changed it. They just like made that much less interesting than it was. Whoa.
Star Wars is a very good example. Actually, I would also say I feel that way about Star. It's wild to me that there is so much Star Wars media that I don't care about consuming. Right? Like, think about how incredibly hyped we were for, you know, new Star Wars kind of content even a couple of years ago. Even just something as simple as like The Mandalorian, right? But there's been seasons of The Mandalorian that we haven't even watched, right?
Yeah. So in the chat, Sarian says woke Hutt sexuality ruined Star Wars for Mango. No, it's the opposite of that. It was arguably more woke beforehand when they were like non-binary hermaphrodites.
It was when they had trad wife Hutts that Mango really got off the Star Wars. Job is supposed to be a real freaky guy. That's true. I also want to call out that Araya in the chat, Rachel in the chat says, my biggest perspective shift since the start of this podcast is how much respect I've lost for both of you. Which is a pretty good, it's just a pretty good answer.
Oh man.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Star Wars makes me feel very homeless, right? People have talked about being politically homeless, you know, like this phrase, I'm politically homeless, right? I'm not represented by either, you know, like whatever, like political sort of like faction or whatever. I am very Star Wars homeless. I feel like there is a sort of Star Wars fan who I would say is just huffing insane amounts of copium, essentially, to pretend that recent Star Wars stuff is as good or as magical as other Star Wars stuff. I have watched people who have gone to bat for like the Rise of Skywalker, and I just sit there and I just want to be like, what drugs are you smoking? I wish I could understand how much you enjoyed that movie, and because that movie ruined so much for me. But also on the other end of the spectrum, you have like the terminal shitters, right? You know, the people who post memes about, you know, whatever, Kathleen Kennedy as like the fucking emperor because they have turned this into this whole crusade about woke Disney, you know, fires stupid actresses or whatever. And like The Last Jedi is like the worst thing. I love The Last Jedi. I still think The Last Jedi is good. If anything, my perspective on The Last Jedi is that it's even better kind of like aged that I have the opposite of turned against something like The Last Jedi. But I also just feel like there's nothing in current Star Wars for me, right? Andor was for me. Maybe it's like that, and maybe that's it. Maybe it's just Andor. Maybe Andor was for me. That's all. And we'll see.
I will go on the record and say I still dislike The Last Jedi. But the other, I mean, there is a part of this too that's like, you know, Red Letter Media. I love Red Letter Media. They got their start with those long videos shitting on the prequels, and honestly, that was an early turn. Was like, I think I would say before college, Star Wars was just kind of like a blob in my brain, right? And then I like sat down and watched all of them as like individual movies, and my perspective on the prequels shifted, right? Like I still don't think they're better than the original trilogy, but I don't think they were as bad as like Red Letter Media would have made them out to be. You know, I still think probably Attack of the Clones is the worst of the first 6. I'd have to think about how I rank it against the other ones, but
well, we're gonna have to rank it later. This is spoilers for our question. Yeah, we got a question to rank the Star Wars movies, right? Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. All right. I think that's enough for that one. Let's continue on.
Okay, wait, hold on. Has there been any, there's no questions in the chat. Okay, I'm pulling the next one. Okay, this one comes from Raylana. Okay, friend of the cast, Raylana. Her first question is, what is a movie or game that everyone loves that you secretly hate?
The easy one for me, I guess everybody hates it now. I hated Harry Potter before it was cool to hate Harry
Yeah,
Potter.
that doesn't count. You have to go hard. I have a really fucking spicy answer.
Okay,
for this
go
one,
go for a spicy one then.
Oh, yeah, well, I was gonna let you go first. Okay, my spicy answer for this one. Are you fucking ready?
Yeah.
Elden Ring. I think it's actually Elden Ring, and I don't. I
don't think that's that spicy.
Really?
I think it's
Okay,
I think the series is polarizing, right? Like,
okay, sure. But I want to come at this from a different angle. This is not about a skill thing. Honestly, it's a little bit about like the skill side of thing. Like for instance, I actually kind of think that most bosses being defeated by sort of timing your iframes well is actually frankly kind of like not great. I don't think that there's a lot of skill expression when it comes to a lot of the boss fights in Elden Ring. It is mostly just kind of about like for instance, I would probably say that most MMO boss fights are better designed than Elden Ring boss fights because at the end of the day, the only skill that the Elden Ring boss fight is testing is can I press dodge at the right time, right? But that's like a mild thing. The boss fights are still fun and engaging in the sense of, you know, they are a challenge to get over the other side of, and you know, for the first 40 hours of the game I was having a really good time with the boss fight. So that's fundamentally like a good, you know, I'm not coming at it from the game design side. I'm coming at it from the fucking lore side. People go so insane for these FromSoft game lore. This lore is dog shit. This world is fucking stupid. I hate it. It's bad. It's bad. It's just bad. I can't fathom how people watch these like 4-hour video essays about the lore of Elden Ring. It's all so fucking stupid and it doesn't matter and it doesn't mean anything. And I cannot put my brain in a place where I connect with. I can understand there are things that I dislike about universes, right? Harry Potter's a good example. I think Harry Potter is kind of stupid and dumb, right? But I actually do understand cognitively, right, the allure of the Harry Potter sort of universe. I understand why someone gets into Harry Potter. I can put myself in their brain. I cannot put myself in the brain of somebody who enjoys Elden Ring or Dark Souls or, you know, like whatever these FromSoft game. I haven't played those. I've only played Elden Ring. This is why I try to keep this to Elden Ring, right? So I cannot fathom how anybody looks at the fucking Elden Ring lore and is like, wow, that's so deep. It's not. It's fucking stupid. Okay, that's my hot take. That's a game that I secretly hate. There you go.
No, that is I understand that. I will for the skill part of it, right? there's a bunch of good comments in the chat. But for the skill part of it, something actually that the Angry GM brought up that I thought was interesting is that essentially Elden Ring is like the most flanderized, like as the FromSoft game goes on, the combat flanderizes itself. Because people keep getting good at these games, in order to like keep increasing the challenge, they have to like make the bosses cheat a little bit more, right? Like there used to be like no tracking attacks in like the early Dark Souls games. Now they're like fairly like the bosses have like an attack that like will track to you or is harder to read or gets, you know, and that has kind of reduced itself to a little bit more of a dodge focused heavy thing than the older games. So I feel that. I think the interest in the lore is, you know, not like, I think the lore is fine. I think it's as fine as any other big video game, as Arahi says in the chat, you haven't watched 70 hours of Five Nights at Freddy's lore videos.
Five Nights at Freddy's, that lore is wild and awful, but the archaeology of putting it together is at least like fun and compelling. And I feel like it has to be like a similar sort of like answer.
Yeah, it's the archaeology. It's because very little of the story is told directly to you. Most of it is like you read an item description and then you have to put the pieces together yourself, or you wait for VatiVidya to put the pieces together for you, right? Like, but in the same way that like you've never played Five Nights at Freddy's and you know Matt Pat put the pieces together for you, right? Like, or something like that, right? Like,
But here's the thing. Even that, I would say, like completes a more compelling narrative than than Elden Ring. Because like, even though first of all, I don't think Five Nights at Freddy's has good lore. It is compelling, but like it's trashy compelling. But second of all, I actually think it like speaks to a certain thing, I don't know, whatever, like a certain through line, I guess, in terms of sort of like a plot line. I haven't gotten the same sort of feeling from that from Elden Ring, and Elden Ring in my mind is being compared against what I would consider to be sort of like fantasy greats, right? Like Lord of the Rings, Warcraft, Warhammer, right? If Elden Ring was a Warhammer game, it would be better. If Elden Ring had the exact same mechanics, but it was in the world of Warhammer instead of the world of fucking Elden Ring, it would be better. And that would be true for any of those universes, right? Because those universes have better, more cohesive lore that I can grasp onto in a better way.
yeah, I think part of the draw is that like almost all of these Souls games are in fallen worlds essentially, and it's piecing together what the old world was like and what caused it to fall. But I get that that's not always that's going to appeal. And like I find myself like, you know, after the release of each of these games, I'll do a stuff and then I'll like maybe watch a Vati video or two, but I don't like, you know, I don't subscribe to him anymore. Yeah. Um, in the chat, Sarian says Souls like Warhammer game would eat a lot of my life for sure. Be honest, would you ever see you again? Yeah, you know, honestly, that would be
Or Dark Tide Knights, yeah. I mean, think about it. You could have like, oh god, how awesome would it be to have a Souls like Warhammer game where you're doing like boss fights against Chaos Spawn and like rat ogres and shit. There are so many like big single entity monsters that would like a slaughter brute of corn, right? Like how cool. Anyway, whatever. I'm not gonna like fan theory. What is your answer to this question?
The thing that I secretly hate that isn't Harry Potter. I've talked about this a little bit before, but I could not get into Shadow of the Colossus. It is
Oh, that is a risky one. Yeah.
yeah. Um like everybody talked about how it was like the greatest game ever. I picked up the remaster and I played through it and I was like, this is boring. I do not find this compelling. It's like a handful of puzzle boss fights that aren't even particularly difficult to figure out. And it felt short and I didn't care about like in terms of like, you know, story that people seem to care about for a long time. It's like there's a girl and you're trying to resurrect her, right? Like that's basically it. Um Lou in the chest says, I think it's one of those games that was innovative and amazing for its time. That might be true. I am willing to allow that like I didn't play it when it was like new.
Yeah, it's like BioShock or something,
yeah.
Right? Yeah,
yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, the Paint Czar, who I'm pretty sure that's Farouk, right? I'm pretty sure Farouk in the chat says random guardsman versus a bloodthirster also would be an amazing a Warhammer Souls-like game would be truly so good. Okay, good. I'm glad. All right, I think it's. I'm sorry. Is it your question? I have not been keeping super great track of questions in the chat. Do we have channel points enabled? No, I guess not. Huh?
No, we don't have enough people. Well, okay. we just got one. And I think it's the latest question.
Okay.
You want to pull it?
Oh yeah, this is your question, I guess. But
you could only play one game for the rest of your life. What is it and why? I will say. I mean, the easy answer is like.
I need a Supreme Court. We need a Supreme Court to answer some interpretive questions.
Oh, okay.
Because that, like, yeah.
Well, for instance, Supreme Court. What's the question?
I'll leave this to the chat. Maybe. The question on my mind is the game updating? So, for instance, if I were to answer World of Warcraft, right, in today, 2020, 2024, the War Within is not out. Does that mean when the War Within comes out, I get to play the War Within? Right, and whatever and Midnight and The Last Titan, all of those, the expansions that are to follow, right? Or am I locked to the game as it exists today?
You see, that's an interesting point because I feel like live service games, part of the draw is that they will constantly update, right? Like, having a game,
Oh, I would say the game continues to update, but if they go to World of Warcraft 2 like EverQuest did, then you're shit out of luck. Okay, that does change my answer. My answer is World of Warcraft. My original answer was going to be Total War Warhammer 3, and I'll tell you why. Total War Warhammer 3 is the biggest game I think I've ever played, and I have like 1,000 hours in it now, and I have probably dwarfed that number in WoW at a certain, like at a certain point, right? But there's just so many different ways to approach that game. Each campaign represents some number of like hundreds of hours, right, of gameplay. And the crucial thing to me is that all of it gets brought kind of like up to the current level, right? So for instance, the Empire is a Warhammer 1 faction that I can play today, and it's a lot of fun, right? My original thought was, well, if I were to play a snapshot of WoW today, the snapshot, and I have to play the same snapshot forever, that snapshot would be bad, essentially, right? Because WoW doesn't bring everything with it, right? WoW is about the current season and the current content, and you need that sort of iterative sort of like cycle going on into the future. So, but because I have a lot of faith that WoW is going to last for quite a long time, and I don't have quite a lot of faith that Warhammer 3 has a lifespan that WoW is not going to end up having. I'm pretty confident that I would be a happier gamer being stuck to WoW than being stuck to Total War. Plus, it's also more social, right? Like, WoW is where I
Yeah.
made all of you guys. That's like, yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like there's got to be a separate answer for a live service game, which I think I'd pick WoW versus like a game like a more single player game.
Yeah, sure, like a Mass Effect 2 or something like that, right? Like a single player.
Yeah.
If it was like a single player experience like that, my answer would be Warhammer for the reasons that right? Like Warhammer is the game that I just think I would get. This is a question in my mind of what can I get the most number of hours with before I never want to touch a video game ever again in my life? And the answer to that is World of Warcraft. Or I'm sorry, the answer to that is Total War Warhammer 3, right? In a version where there's live service updates, my answer shifts to World of Warcraft. In a version without, it's Warhammer.
Yeah. I mean, on the one hand, and for my answer, on the one hand, I want to say something like Crusader Kings 3 for very similar reasons, right? Like it's the game I attach myself the most to. It'll get updates for a while before they move on to Crusader Kings 4. I can probably play that game endlessly from different dukes and duchesses and whatnot. There's a part of me that wants to like pick like one of the classic Street Fighters, right? Like I'm not good at Third Strike, but like if that's all I get to do for the rest of my life, I might get good at Third Strike. I just don't have faith that like the newer Street Fighters 4, 5, 6 will like have the staying power that Third Strike does. Yeah. And that's and for the live service, I gotta say, well, just because of the social aspect, right? Like I have been dipping my toes into Destiny. I like Destiny, but I've got basically one friend who plays regularly, and and I don't. Even though I think if I could choose my friend group, right? Like I think I enjoy Destiny more from a game level. I think the social aspect WoW has to win out there.
Yeah, okay. I think I agree. All right, it's back to my question. We're going to move on to Mingo. Okay, this is the first of Mingo's questions. Mingo Neshoba, are you now or have you ever been tempted to become a VTuber? I had plans to become a VTuber actually, that didn't materialize because of scope reasons. But I guess the answer is yes. We were gonna make a Cryptmaster VTuber, and I was going to stream it, but we kind of it became prohibitive to put that together. Is really what it came down to.
Sorry, this is gonna be a short one for me. No. I don't really get VTubers. I saw on I think Instagram today. It was like a post that was like when you've had a few beers at the Dodgers games and you think you're having like a stroke, and it's just a VTuber singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" on the screen. It's a real thing that happened.
Yeah, I also do not understand VTubers. I theoretically know some. I don't, because I've obviously like Mingo and people I work with and everything. But yeah. Who do I have to trade my soul to make the Crypt Keeper VTuber model real? I don't know. Faye, I guess. She was who was working on it, but it was just like we literally mathed it out. I was like, if this is gonna take 10 hours of work, it is not worth it. She was like, it's gonna take like 20 hours of work. And I said, okay, scratch that.
That sounds like a thing that like, they should do, maybe, right? Like, but I feel like that question's pretty put out. But question from my side. Episode from Akshay, friend of the cast, Akshay Krishnaswamy. Do you have predictions for the climax of the World Soul Saga?
Yeah, well, yeah, yes. Okay, here are some predictions. Here's some
Just
things
say
I'm gonna
yes
go on
and
record.
don't say anything else.
Number one, Azeroth is not a Titan. Azeroth is a first one. That's my key cornerstone prediction to all of this, right? We have been essentially sold this lie that Azeroth has been a Titan this whole time, but she isn't. She's the first one. And this is why all of these different forces are all vying to control and or kill her. Because not that she is going to be a Titan who is going to awaken and do Titan stuff, but that, she has just as much chance of becoming order infused as she does of becoming life infused, as she does of becoming void infused. This is the direction that I think the lore is going in.
What is the first one?
The first ones are the people who created, or not necessarily the first one, just like that she is not a Titan, that she is
Okay.
kind of like, she could be a Titan, she could be a Void Lord, she could be an Eternal One. The Eternal Ones are like the Titans of Shadowlands. The Jailer is an Eternal One. The first ones are the people who created the cosmos as we know them, right? So the architects of Zereth Mortis, the Shadowlands, the nature of Fel and Arcane or whatever, these are all first ones, right? Sarah in the chat says, "I guarantee that no matter what, Azeroth is going to be racked," which is very true. I think that for the World Soul Saga, I think Azshara is coming back. I think Azshara is going to be a major boss. Specifically in Midnight is my thing. I think Xalatath will probably be the final boss of the War Within, right? That the sort of point of the War Within will be fighting Xalatath. She's going to do some void stuff. That void stuff is going to matter, and that part of that essentially the final boss for Midnight is going to be Azshara, just because we know that that's very elven focused. It would make so much sense. Azshara left, she's going to come back, she's going to be broken out of her void prison and all this other sort of stuff. I don't know. What's a good prediction for the last Titan? We're gonna fight Iridikron, and Iridikron is going to use boss mechanics from his fight in the Dawn of the Infinite. I am so convinced of this one. Okay. In the Dawn of the Infinite, he had a bunch of different mechanics, and I bet those mechanics are going to be sort of like raid mechanics now. They're gonna be pumped up from sort of the they're gonna be pumped up from whatever dungeon mechanics to raid mechanics. That's one of my predictions. Let's see who's gonna die. Who's gonna die
in World Soul Saga? Somebody old from the Alliance side. The King of Gilneas. What's his name?
Oh, Gen Greymane.
Gen Greymane. He's like, he's got like enough, like, maybe did some bad things that like anybody who's like morally ambiguous is like dies heroically. That's how they redeem themselves, right? Like,
yeah, he is like 2-1 odds, I would say. There are like Anduin is like 15-1 odds. I think Anduin is gonna make it out just because he's like, like you can't kill Big Andy, right? But like Gen Greymane is like walking into work like, well, time to retire, right? Like
finally get to spend some time with my kids, right? Like,
yeah, he just named a successor. He just named, Tess as like the queen of Gilneas. He just like abdicated. It would be pretty. He's really looking to die. He's really looking to take a hike. I wonder who on the Horde is like in a position to die. Not many. There are not a lot of like up and comers. This is one of the things.
Who's the functional war chief at this point?
Well, nobody, because they have that council.
Oh, it's a council now. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I could see Lorth of Martharon die. That would be my bet of all of the Horde. People who are gonna die. Lorthamar is he's on the way out. Okay. He's going to be Pathos. He's going to die in Midnight. Everyone's going to be really sad about it, but they're going to introduce like new elven characters, or they're going to give a new highlight to an elven character who we haven't seen in a while, who is going to be like the new, he's going to be the new regent, or she, right? It's going to be the new regent. It's going to be Ramath or somebody like that. Lorthamar, he just got married. They have to kill him so his children have a tragic backstory. True.
I think like this is like a long pull, but I could see them doing something where like halfway through the World Soul Saga, they bring back Sylvanas and she dies in like a redemption arc. But
oh yeah, I could see that. Like in the middle of Midnight, they have to go get Sylvanas to do something. She's like, well, look who you fucking is. Like in her super nasally voice.
I think they'd play it actually a little bit differently. Like her time doing penance has like, truly changed her, and she's like kind of aesthetic, and she's like,
oh yeah, that's true. You know what? She's gonna come in with like a heroic moment, right? Where it's all hope has been lost, and then you just see like, and it's like one of those smoke arrows that she has, those shadow arrows, and the guy's gonna be like, gah! And then it's gonna be like, bah! And she's gonna be there standing on like a rock with like her bow and a bunch of skeletons or some shit, or like the armies of the Shadowlands behind her. Or something. That would be my bet. Is that Sylvanas returns?
No, that is almost yes. That I can see that too.
Okay. Joke's on you. They're gonna show Gen in the back of one cutscene and then cut to Malfurion for a 16-minute. That's true. I would have said Malfurion is like number one to die, but he had his chance to die in Dragonflight, and they pussyfooted around it. They couldn't commit. Okay. And then all of his PR pants and excitement. Okay, yeah. Anyway, what are your predictions?
No, I mean, I told you Sylvanas, right? Like,
Sylvanas. Okay,
yeah, I just had this image in my mind of like, someone like, like lining up a shot on Anduin, and like, what's the leader of the gnomes is Mechatork, right?
Yeah,
like Mechatork just like taking the shot and being like, and like supposed to be like this big moment, everybody being like, who are you again, right? Like, the thing that killed me was, and this is like a 5-10-year-old video at this point, is the Killian's Guide to World of Warcraft, right? Where he's like, and the gnomes who haven't been in a cutscene in like 10 years, and like the next expansion they like put him off to the side in the cutscene.
Okay. You know what reminds me of? Do you remember the Weird Al movie? I just watched a YouTube video. I hadn't watched this in a long time. Do you remember the Weird Al movie that we watched with Dan
no, yeah, that one, yeah,
Radcliffe? Yeah. There was I watched a thing where they were like explaining how they made one of the scenes. They had this pool party scene where Weird Al shows up and he sings "Another One Rides the Bus," at the pool party to all of these like Alice Cooper or whatever. They got all these like comedians and people all over Hollywood, to come as cameos. And Conan O'Brien is Andy Warhol in that. And I remember thinking at the time it was weird. They show this insert, I think it's twice, of Andy Warhol clapping like weirdly like this or whatever, and they talked about how Conan O'Brien could only get up to Weird Al's house for an hour, so they had to just shoot a bunch of stuff and then edit him in post to make it seem like he was part of the big group. And that's what they do. Oh, true. Okay, next question. This one comes from Jimmy, longtime listener, maybe our longest time listener. What retro game would y'all want to be remade today and think it would actually be amazing? Remade, I have to assume that like the whole thing would be rebuilt from the ground up. That has to be correct, right?
Yeah. Like is this like, Final Fantasy VII level remake, or because if it's that, then
I think it has to be that. A remaster would be the other version, right?
Yeah, right. Because like one of the things that popped in my head was like Super Mario Brothers 3, which is one of my favorite games of all time. But like, you can't really change that and have it be the same game, right? Like, it just has to be an updated like skin, which I don't think is the right answer.
Where does retro start for you? What's the year of retro? 10 years? 20 years?
I was thinking, does Skyrim count as retro? Like, I think that's like,
I have an answer from the mid 2000s that you might call bullshit on. It's 2005, which is almost 20 years ago.
yeah.
But okay, my answer is Dragon Age Origins.
Okay.
Because I think the original Dragon Age sucks, is bad. It has not aged well, right? But it's not because, I mean, it is a little bit because the underlying mechanics are sort of like clunky, right? But if this is the kind of game that I think you could remake it as sort of a modern CRPG, right? Not quite in the style of Baldur's Gate, but pretty close to sort of what that would look like, right? You keep most of the core kind of like mechanics, you keep most of the core, you know, like the characters, the story, all that stuff is the same. All that stuff was great, you know, in Dragon Age Origins. But you really just kind of gussy it up, and it would really, I think that would do gangbusters, right? Especially because in my mind, like the big problem with Dragon Age Origins is just going to be that 2005 was like just before cutscenes started looking really good. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of the difference between Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2 also rode this sort of line. Mass Effect 2 is 2010, Mass Effect 1 is 2007 or something like that. And I just feel like the leap in those 3 years was insane in terms of just like fidelity. Like I'm actually like watching kind of real sort of, you know, like real sort of people. Which I think was probably more now, right? I think most people say that the cutscenes in like Dragon Age 2 looked much better, and you know, all the graphics and that kind of stuff. So I would say Dragon Age Origins. That would be my answer.
I've got a couple of weird answers. One of them is going to be like there are a couple of like N64 games that I think, and these aren't ones that you're probably thinking of, like, you know, like games that are a little bit before their time. No, I'm thinking of Donkey Kong 64, which I thought did a lot to like, yeah, I see that look in your eyes. That like it was very innovative, I feel like, for a platformer, right? And you can push that in ways without breaking, like I said with Super Mario Bros. 3, you can't really change it without like fundamentally changing the game. I think you can make Donkey Kong 64 play more like an action game, and have it still like feel like Donkey Kong 64. In the same vein, Kirby 64, like the dual power one, I thought that was super cool. But the problem there is, what I actually want is like, because like modern Kirby games exist, they all like, Kirby games are not particularly difficult. They're all kind of like, you know, they're like very kid games even for Nintendo. But a Kirby game that's like an character action game, like a Devil May Cry, I think would be awesome. So I don't know if that really like is in the spirit of the question, because that feels like less like a remake and more just kind of like a genre reinterpretation. But those are the ones that like are sticking in my head and that I can't quite get out. Like the amount of like flexibility and cool stuff you got in Kirby 64 that you really haven't gotten since, right? I'm pretty sure they haven't had a dual power game since then. They've all been kind of like, and they've had like various and sundry different games with different powers and varying different qualities out of Kirby. But Kirby 64, I think, was something special. Also, like kickstarted, like Kirby has like deep lore that like 3 people on the internet care about. But yeah, those are my
Okay.
answers.
What if the answer is remastered? Do you have an answer to that question? Like if the sort of interpretation is flipped.
I mean, a lot of the games that I would have thought of like got a remaster, right? Like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 got remasters.
You know what the best one is? You know, this one is for you. Okay, people at, I don't even remember where they published this. EA maybe. The Lord of the Rings games. Okay, Two Towers, The Return of the King. Do you remember those games? Did you play those licensed like midway Lord of the Rings games? Those games. Those are the 2 I want. I would kill for remasters of those games. They were so fun.
You mean the ones that are kind of like character, or the ones that are kind of like Diablo type games, but like.
Yeah. But you're playing as like Aragorn, and you can play as Aragorn, Legolas, or Gimli, and they have like different, like Aragorn is both, Gimli is very melee, right? Yeah. Those games are, I think those would be the
actually
remasters that just actually kill.
Like a remake of one of the of a Gauntlet game to be like a little bit more than like, it's kind of like shooting four directions, right? Like I think it'd be cool.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I loved those games. The Fellowship game was fucking awful though. True. True. That one was real bad. Honestly, the unsung one from those is Lord of the Rings The Third Age, which was it was like a turn-based RPG, right? Like it was almost like a JRPG, it kind of
yeah.
felt like. It kind of was almost like Final Fantasy X or something, right? That game was great, the greatest. Hadhod the dwarf just missed constantly.
Uh,
Okay, I think we have questions from the chat.
yeah. Well, I took the last one from the chat, and I don't want to get skipped again, so you take this one from the
Okay.
chat.
Are you sure? I'll take this one real quick. You can romance any character in WoW, not including RP characters. Who and why?
Uh, I honestly, this is not a thing I even think about like at all.
I just want to hold on. Chat, see if you can guess my answer. Do you guys know what I'm going to say? I'll just leave them to figure it out. Your turn.
I'm gonna say the panda woman from the scenario where she's brewing stuff because I've been playing that recently and she's sassy. So
I understand that. I've been playing it recently, and she's sassy. Really, none of like the mainline characters, none of whatever. Sylvanas, you don't want to fucking whatever.
no, Sylvanas is like weird and undead. Jaina is like crazy, doing war crimes. Who else? Who else is there? I don't know. The night elves are all kind of aloof. I don't get anything out of most of the other characters. Yeah, I don't know. Like that's like I feel like I don't know lore well enough, and like like my favorite character, like I like Chromie as a character. Don't want to romance her. That's weird. Alex Straza, that's a strong contender, I guess, for the asshole.
Yes. Well, so okay, I do want to point out there is a difference between romance and bone. Okay.
Sure.
The character I would want to romance is going to be very different than the character that I would be theoretically looking to bone. It's honestly tough because I'm in this place where I don't really know, but I would have said Anduin. That would have been my answer. I think Anduin, he's just so precious, and he's like Shadowlands era Anduin. God, you'd have no idea. But they've also sort of ruined him recently, and I don't know what's going on with the War Within. I am much less attracted to Anduin since he's like hidden his PTSD, like the PTSD version of Anduin. That would probably like my most I don't know, sort of straightforward sort of answer. Sylvanas, no Jaina, Tyrande, Illyria, Jaina's mom, Alex Straza, random sassy panda, yes.
Yeah, the pandas are great.
Yeah.
All right. This one is from Alex Zhao, also friend of the cast.
Also friend of the cast.
Official social media manager for the podcast. Which episode do you regret the most of the 400 you've done? I have an answer for this.
You do?
I do.
Okay.
It is. Some Derps talk about movies to Captain America Civil War, because this was the first Marvel movie we did, and it has cursed us to an eternity of watching Marvel movies. So that is the answer. We start.
Oh, man, what's the... honestly, I feel like it's got to be some no-name episode. There have been a couple of episodes where I just feel like we get off the cast, and I just feel like I haven't said anything insightful or profound. I feel like I've just wasted everybody's time because, like, we're just, like, vamping, or, like, we didn't have anything interesting or complex to say on a topic. There are sometimes, you guys don't see this behind the scenes, there's sometimes where, like, Mango and I have to, like, fight for a good topic because we want to we want to get together and put an episode out, but we're just, like, having a hard time sort of finding something. Those are the episodes I regret the most, but I don't remember that because, like, kind of fundamentally, I think that they're forgettable, right? The episodes that I think are the memorable ones that stick with me are the ones where I feel like we have hit on the most profound sort of like indification or roguelitification. I guess we did both those episodes.
Yeah.
Those episodes are important to me because I think that we kind of hit on something that was like unique and profound and insightful, right? The Man of Steel and Batman v Superman episodes I both think are really great because I felt like we really dug our teeth in and actually got to the meat of some of this sort of like media criticism stuff that we're doing. This is some of our like our best work.
That was our first movie episode, actually, was Man of Steel.
Yeah, and like and there have been other ones. The Watchmen episode is amazing, right? Honestly, both the Watchmen TV show and the Watchmen movie episodes are both really strong, right? Because these are the episodes where I feel like we really sunk our teeth in. But the episodes that I always, the episodes that are the ones that I regret are the episodes where I feel like I just haven't said anything worthwhile, and I'm never gonna remember the names of any of the episodes. So
yeah, no, and like, so I have the episodes in my right hand window. I'm like looking through them, and like one I stopped on was Magnificent Seven. It was like the Magnificent Seven remake was kind of like, I don't remember it, but I did put a lot of effort into like doing research, right? Like this will happen, right? We'll do a new property, and like I will spend a bunch of time just like researching the hell out of, like, by researching I mean like consuming the related media, right? Like I watched like a dozen different versions of the Seven Samurai in preparation for the Magnificent Seven remake, and I thought that was valuable. But on the other hand, one that's a strong contender for episode I wish we never did was the Dark Tower movie, because I read like 30 Stephen King books and I hated 29 of them, I think. So like,
movie was bad. That would be a good answer. The Dark Tower would be a good answer because I think that movie sucked, and I think you put so much work. And that whole episode was me just asking you these wild lore questions about like
what was happening.
Yeah. Wow, what the fuck was happening? God, yeah. Wow, bad movies. Whew, bad movies. There are some episodes that I have in my head that I think are episodes where I tried really hard and ultimately failed. I think the Assassin's Creed movie is bad, but like I wanted to like it and I wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt. So I fought pretty hard for that movie. And in retrospect, I would disagree with myself and I just would have trashed on it, right? But at the time, I felt like everybody was trashing and I didn't want to. I just didn't want to be that guy. You know what I mean? Wait, there was an Assassin's Creed movie, yes, and it was starring Michael. I don't know. It's a very
and he was like jumping around like inside of like a mechanical arm attached to his waist. And I can't remember, was that like diegetic or was that like a behind the scenes thing I saw? And I cannot remember for the life of me.
I don't remember. They set a world record because they actually did an eagle. The Assassin's Creed, you do those eagle drops where you go to the top of a building and then jump into some fucking hay and it's fine or whatever. They did one of those for real and they set a record for longest like free fall where somebody has, like done an intentional free fall to drop into something. So yeah. Okay. Okay, next question. We're going back up to the top. This one comes from Monic. What joke conversation on the podcast has made you laugh the most? Man, I don't have a great example. You know what I want to do? I want to give a shout out to Rachel because Rachel in the chat will have these banger jokes that are so funny. I feel like that's the most I've ever.
Yeah, no, it will stop. Like, I think I mentioned on the podcast. I like while we're watching Clone Wars, if a random clone dies, I will call him Feet or Sixes just because. Like,
good one, yeah.
Which is like my own stupidity that you were like willing to walk over, but like in the chat, Rachel's just like, Feet? Really? So,
I don't remember what episode this is from, but the conversation was us talking about the clones having weird names or whatever.
Well, no, it was about being able to get pathos out of random clones. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And like I had to come up with example names off the top of my head. I can't. This happens to me occasionally. Like I'll get like a thing stuck in my like. I'll be like, that's a bad name, but I can't get it out of my head. Right.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah. Yeah. So next up, from our friend Aaron Abugaber, is there an episode topic that you would like to revisit or didn't get the chance it deserved? You didn't feel like it got the chance?
Ooh, man, that's interesting. You know what? I gotta look at the backlogs for this because there's gonna be some in the very beginning that I want to redo.
I
Do you
was
know what
like
I mean?
at the very very beginning. We did like 4 episodes on Fallout 4.
Really?
Well, because our first episode was Fallout 4, and there was like the hype
Yeah.
train starts to derail. The hype train is back on track, right? Like,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's true. I did forget about that.
I think it'd be interesting. I'm looking at episode 53 is how to RP in WoW. We haven't talked about RP in a while. It'd be interesting maybe to revisit that because I still don't really do that.
God, we have had so many episodes. I have just been scrolling down. I'm at 6 years ago. I've been scrolling down for like more than a minute at this point.
Yeah.
Oh boy, oh boy. Man, we talked about some wild stuff in the beginning. Theater Kids and Captain Crunches. That was episode 8. That is one of the most insightful things we have ever. I
Yeah.
like talk about Theater Kids and Captain Crunches all actually. You know, I'm looking at a bunch of different tabletop games or tabletop, episodes that we've made. We used to do more of these, I guess, or like a better number of these, right? We have like Ultimate Intrigue, right? Where like look, some of this stuff is stuff that I would probably want to do more, right? I would want to go back and take a look at some of that stuff. I think that there's like a lot of stuff to be kind of mined out of the, you know, I don't know, the good stuff in there. There's like a bunch of stuff that is homebrew from my games that I think I would be interested in taking a look at, sort of like progression wise, right? Like mythic and personal progression. It would just have to be like one of these that I would end up wanting to go back to, because I just feel like there's so much, like, I don't know, there's like so much interesting stuff in there.
Yeah. But I think that's enough. We've got a lot of questions. We can maybe be a little bit light on some of these.
True.
We got 2 more in the chat. The first or the second one's quick. Rachel says, "Are you guys gonna ever have me on the cast? Just make bangers in the chat." Buddy, I think that ball's in your court.
I have invited you. First of all, I have fucking invited you to the chat before. You have been invited onto the podcast to talk about things, and I think you said no. You were like, "Why would you put me on the podcast?" And I was like, "I don't know, fucking, I don't know. I think you'd be insightful." So you could. It would probably. I think it's an eventual. I'm gonna go with yes. My official prediction: some derps talk about games will feature Rachel at some point.
Yeah, I'm all for it as well. And Lorna Terrius' question: what's an episode you wanted to make but didn't get to? And this actually dovetails with Mark's other question: what's a topic you haven't covered on the cast but want to someday? I think these are good. These go hand in hand together. So I'd say for episode you wanted to make but didn't get to, there's been a bunch of movies and TV shows that we just haven't gotten around to, like Mando 2, Furiosa.
Oh yeah, Furiosa.
Andor, right? Like, I think there was like one that I watched that you didn't get around to. But like,
Loki. We didn't do Loki.
Loki.
Yeah.
We haven't done Loki.
We should do Loki.
we should do Loki because
Deadpool's coming up.
Yeah, Deadpool's coming up.
Yeah. That's a good question. You know what? Here's one that I've wanted to do for a long time. And maybe we ended up doing this one, but I have forgotten it. I had this thing about, I really loved the idea of doing a version of the podcast where you and I get to talk a little bit about sort of the core games that define our sort of like lives, right? Because I feel like I can chart a path from kind of one game to the next. Like, this is the game that started me on video games. This is the game that matured my understanding of video games. This is the game that unlocked a really important genre, right? And I would probably choose like 5, right? We could just go from one to the next, because I feel like that's a really interesting way to sort of do and I especially like the idea of doing this on a guest episode, right? Like doing a guest episode with somebody where they come on and you get to ask them this question about like the 5 video games that like kind of like define their lives. But I would want to do it with you and me first so that I could show somebody what the sort of like process
Right.
would look like, right? Just because I like the idea of bringing on guests, and I think guests are like cool and unique. And I think that's like a really interesting way for people to kind of conceptualize their sort of like personal story and biography. It's like, what are the games that I have played? What is the trajectory of my gaming life? Why did I go so hard into this genre? Well, it's because I played this game, that kind of.
Yeah, and we've got an old episode called Our Games Media. I don't remember exactly what we talked about there, but
That one was us talking about YouTubers and Kotaku and all that
was
stuff.
it? Wow.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
mhm.
But yeah, no, that would be fun. That'd be fun to like. But that's one that we're like, most of these episodes are kind of like we come with an idea and we fly by the seat of our pants and we talk for a while, right?
Yep. True.
Even our video games award show is like that way by design, right?
Yep,
that requires
true.
some like work and like pre planning to pull off, which I think would be super fun, but we need to put some effort into it. Why did I go so hard into WoW? Because I discovered Torrent. Otherwise, I'd probably have quit in 2006. Hey,
Damn, that's relatable.
No, I mean, I think that's like a real thing, right? Like if you don't have a character you can lock into, like I play a lot of fighting games. I picked up one of the King of Fighters, but I didn't find a character that really spoke to me, so I just dropped it, right? Like, whereas like I played Strive for a while as Potemkin, I played Street Fighter as Zangief. You need something that like makes the game fun to play, and sometimes it's just aesthetics, right?
Yeah. Okay, so next question. This one comes from Raylana. If you had 3 wishes, what would they be? I would obviously wish for a gazillion wishes.
Osho was taller.
Include some parameters, Raylana. Come on. I feel like I would actually want to be like incredibly simple wishes. I would want like one, the ability to teleport, right? Like, God, how much of my life would be so much better if I could just teleport, right? I don't know. That's like the only thing I ever think about in terms like of a big wish.
Yeah, so like, there's this thing in my head. It's like a superpower with like a reasonable limit on it, and like for me, it's like ability to teleport between places with the same name, right? Like being able to teleport from Randolph, Massachusetts to Randolph, New Jersey, right? Like,
Really?
well, it's because like I there are a lot of places like there is a Fremont 15 minutes from me, right?
Okay.
And I've got friends in California. There's this Fremont near San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things. Like it'd be super useful to be able to teleport. Like it'd be very useful to be able to teleport arbitrarily. But if I had to like put a limit on it, right? Like being able to teleport between places with the same name, make teleportation.
Yeah.
No,
I would probably wish for some level of immortality, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like obviously I would wish for some level of ability. In particular, I would like to eat garbage for the rest of my life and not have to worry, right? Like,
Yeah.
A version of things where I could just have, a reasonable expectation that I'm going to be like normal and healthy would probably be pretty nice, and some level of teleportation is what I would wish for.
Yeah, like the ability to eat whatever I wanted without consequence would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's kind of funny how it's like I feel like I'm just these are quality of life upgrades, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, I'm gonna redo my life, but you know what I would wish for? I would wish for time travel, and I would want to go back in time. Okay, I would want to relive my life over again, but be able to like make all of the correct decisions, like save scumming my whole life. That would be awesome. Are you kidding? Can you imagine save scumming your whole life?
I feel like that way lies madness, right? Like, like
True. Yeah.
I think I would like if I could like memoize. If I could like set like save points, right? Like if I could guarantee that I could jump back to right now, right? Like without having to like figure out how to like, because that feels like a horror movie, right? Like you jump back and you realize that you want to be where you were, but you have to like you have to manually make the choices the same, and like you just like keep screwing up for like arbitrary reasons. Like you took a left and you should have taken a right, right? Like, you know, that kind of thing. Um that feels like it could be hard territory. So I'd want at least like some ability to be like, I want to anchor here and be able to snap back. Yeah, monkeypaw.gif. Yes.
Monkeypaw.gif. I really love the idea of new life plus. Yeah, I imagine I would want to wish, this would be a very complicated wish, okay, but it's all one wish, where I would want to create a save point system, because I would want to jump between playthroughs, right, of my own, like of my own life.
Yeah, being able to save scum your life, I think, would be awesome, right? Like,
yeah. Like how many just like little stupid mistakes, how many embarrassing decisions, right? Like, just like the one time that I shit my pants. You know what I mean? Like, get rid of that. Just don't do that one, right?
Or like, there are definitely some points in my life where I'd like to be like, I would like to choose the other option just to see what it was like, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and then like, run it back to the present, right? Like, and not have to commit to it, right? Like, man, because I think about this sometimes, right? Like, I almost went to a different college, a college that had a game design program.
Me too.
I almost went to Rensselaer Polytech. I think I deposited at Rensselaer Polytech, and then I changed my mind and decided to go to Hopkins. When I moved out to San Francisco, I worked for a small startup, but I had an offer at Amazon that probably would have been the right financial decision for me to have made at the time. But then I would have met like, I just think about the things that fall down from this, right? Like I wouldn't have met some very close friends. Like I wouldn't have met Enoch. I wouldn't have met Alexio. Alexio would have never been roommates with Zhao. Our friend Mark would have never met his wife Florence, because Florence was a coworker of mine, right? Like, and so like I would like not want. I would love to see what that was like. Would be able to revert it because of the way things are, right? Like, butterfly effect.
Butterfly effect was indeed a wild. Ashton Kutcher classic butterfly effect getting a mention.
You know what, Sarian? If I hadn't moved to San Francisco, we might have not all started playing WoW together. So
True.
Yeah,
because it was your roommate at the time who got us all back into. It was Charles who really wanted us to play WoW. Yeah, true.
And he was the one that wanted to do PvP, and you were the one that wanted to do RP, which is how we ended up on Twisting Nether, right? Like.
Okay, we got a question in the chat from Mard. You can go back and influence the creation of any game. What game?
Wait. It's my turn because it's my turn to ask a question.
Oh, okay, go for it. Yeah.
Because Paul James on Twitter asked, did you ever think you'd reach 400 episodes? Like, I honestly don't know how long I expected this to go for. But it's gone for 9 years and 400 episodes, right?
At a certain point, I have become sort of endlessly confident in our ability to like, do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like the next hurdle is kids. Are we gonna be able to podcast when like, or if we end up having like kids or when we're fucking dads? Okay, we're gonna be dads with a podcast. Okay, that to me is like
dads talk about games.
We're gonna rebrand the whole channel, right? I feel like that would be the sort of only other like big like hiccup, or like if one of us got like, God forbid, like cancer or something like that, right? But like in general, I think the podcast has survived moves, and it survived, I don't know, just like a million different things. To me, it is a like just like a baseline of my life, and I don't see a version of things where we miss it. I was gonna say by episode 100, I was pretty confident we'd get to episode 400.
Yeah, no, I mean, there have been times when like like past, I would say, year or so, we have been less like first 4 years. I don't think we missed an episode, and we've been like the rate hasn't been super consistent over the past, I'd say, year or so, but like it's not like I ever had any doubt that there would be a next episode, right? Like,
it is always like 1 week off, and a lot of times it's like we just can't. It's like there's just like nothing to talk about. Okay, whatever. It's like, oh, you're traveling. It's like, I'm gonna be in whatever. Oh, I'm gonna be at PAX. It's like, okay, we won't do an episode this week. Like that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I think despite some efforts, I don't think we've recorded an episode in person together yet. So, that's
That's true. We're gonna be able to do that. Okay,
yeah.
yeah. Well, listen.
uh,
Yeah, we have never recorded an episode together. That's crazy.
yeah. All right, your poll. Sorry.
Okay, I pull this one from the chat from Mart. You can go back and influence the creation of any game. What game and what do you change? I don't have a good answer to this one, to be honest with you.
Uh-huh. Like, I feel like I'd have to like pick something that like I think is good, except for a. I think the easy answer is make the ending of Mass Effect 3 good, right? Like, or good from the start, right? Like,
I would make that. Yeah, I would make that change instantly. I would go back and I would make Mass Effect 3. I wouldn't even make. I don't even think the ending of Mass Effect 3 is that bad, technically speaking, right? Like, I think it's fine. I was a defender of the ending at the time, but this is mostly just because I kind of thought like the outrage was overblown, which has always sort of been true. Right? Like, I think most of the people who were mad about the ending of Mass Effect 3 are mostly wrong, kind of on the merits. And at a certain point it kind of became like the backlash to a lot of different things where it was like it was more about the backlash than it was about anything material in the sort of DNA of what they were kind of like criticizing. But I think of I would rewrite the ending of Mass Effect 3. You know what I would do? No, yeah, it would be Mass Effect 3 is what I would
yeah, I would
change.
say I feel like you could even like improve it by just like making the Citadel DLC like available day one, that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
The thing I was going to say is I would push the release date of Mass Effect Andromeda by 3 months. I would say we want 3 more months and I think it'd be fine. I think everybody would love that game, and it would get a sequel and DLC and all that other stuff, and it would be glorious because that game is actually pretty great, to be honest with you. But it just got destroyed because like it had that one thing about the dead eyes and like people walking upstairs weird, and it just got memed to death. And I feel like it would just improve everyone's experience about that game, and it's much better.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an answer in here about I can't believe Anthem, right? Like, like
My beloved. I care about Mass Effect more than I care about Anthem, I guess is. You know what I would do? Here, actually, you know what? Real answer. I would go and I would make Anthem a Mass Effect game. It would just be a game about It would just be Mass Effect, right? In the future, the Mass Effect you put on suits. That's the new thing about is you're on a planet and you're on this planet and you fly around in your fucking space suits, but it's all Mass Effect characters and lore, and there's all this new stupid dumb bullshit, right? I would make that change in a heartbeat.
yeah, like that's a game that screamed like wasted potential to me, right? Because like,
Yeah.
um, those are the ones that I would think about, because everything like the games I really like, I don't want to change, right? I want them to be the way they are. Uh, I did Starfield. Oh man, tell Todd it's gonna be okay. That's what I would.
There was like a fleeting minute where I got into Starfield.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. This is my. So is it your question? Is my question?
No, I did not realize you had pulled that from the chat, so I think it's your question from.
Okay.
Text.
This one comes from Mingo. Mingo to show about what do you think is the biggest video game console failure that should have been a hit?
As the console, or as the or like a game on the console?
Let's say the console. I think the console is more interesting.
We have
that was my where my
in the
brain
chat
went.
we have console from Mingo, the console itself.
Okay.
The Ouya. Caesarean.
That's literally my answer. I actually think if the Ouya was a hit, we would look at a completely different indie game market. This is a business, this is business buddy, right? This is professional like indie game publisher buddy. The Ouya is sort of the groundwork for a lot of the indie game market that I think we are all reaping the benefits of today. Not that, I would say these things are necessarily kind of like causal, right? But a lot of the fabric for the stuff that you get, man, this is such a business answer. Okay, so as an indie game publisher, I have actually strong relationships with Valve and Nintendo, PlayStation and Xbox. the first real people to sort of do that, to kind of like open up their platforms to publishers on my scale, right? To indie game developers who are, developing games in Unity, just like we always kind of like talk about. The first console to really do that was the Ouya. The Ouya was kind of targeting that market. They were like, you know what, listen, I can't compete with God of War and Halo, but I can compete with, Bastion and Braid, essentially, right? And it sort of like laid the groundwork for this. And I don't want to say that like these things didn't happen because or it was like a one-to-one correlation. This is or causation, because it's more correlation than anything else. But the Ouya had the bottom line framework and was kind of the first major kind of like place to take indie games sort of seriously, and I think has the DNA of sort of what we now sort of are reaping the benefits of in sort of Steam, and PlayStation and all these other sort of like indie kind of focused uh platforms, right? Like the fact that I can get through Nintendo Live Check, right? That stuff was sort of set by the Ouya. And so yeah, the Ouya would be my
Man, I just feel like an Android based console was kind of always doomed to fail, especially at the point at which it was coming out. Like I just don't think there's quite enough there, because like you have an Android console on you at all times. It's your phone unless you have an iPhone, but like but it's close enough, right? Like
yeah. I mean, hey, that's true.
I mean, I don't know if I think that any of them that came out should have been that weren't a hit should have been a hit, right? Like, the classic answer is Dreamcast, but I don't have strong opinions on Dreamcast. I know that friend of the cast actually would say the Vita, right? And like, what else is there? Like the Wii U. I don't think that should have been a hit. Name was stupid and the pad was stupid, right? Like, and it was a capacitive touchscreen, right? Like
The Virtual Boy. Yeah, I mean, I don't believe it for really. There are little things, right? The Dreamcast is a good answer, right? Dreamcast, was playing into sort of like online stuff, sort of right before the Xbox came and blew it out of the water, basically, right? You could make someone else could make the argument about I would never really make that argument, but somebody else could make the argument about Dreamcast. I don't know. Yeah, the Wii U.
I've got an interesting sub answer, which is, do you remember? I think it was the Xbox Series. Was the Xbox Series? It was maybe it was the Xbox One. It was the one where they were like,
you have to have the Kinect.
Well, not you have to have the Kinect, that you are going to essentially install your games and it's going to be on your account and you can share it with your friends over that. And then everybody memed it to death. And then like, Sony was like, this is how you share your games to friends. And he just like handed a box to their friend, right? I think for like realistic usage purposes, the Xbox model was correct, right? Like that actually would have been a better way for most people to have used games, right? Like, to be able to install it. And like, obviously there was a thing about like killing the secondary market, but I don't think a lot of people actually engage the secondary market that heavily, especially since like a lot of people also have digital libraries now, right? Like,
what this was? This was in 2014. I want to say this was the Xbox One. And part of it was there was all of this hype and fervor about always online. Diablo 3, right? That was always online. That was a huge controversy. That was 2 years prior in 2012, right? And there was this big thing about everybody wanted to be able to play their games offline. But I think you're right. I think the Xbox model was correct. And in fact, the Xbox model is kind of what we have now, sort of through Game Pass in a certain sense, right? I don't own an Xbox console, right? But theoretically, Xbox gets a certain amount of my money every month because I have Game Pass and I can play a Game Pass game. And like, I think they are more correct than the kind of more analog answer that was given in 2013, 2014, right? Wow, this was actually 2013. Now that I think about it, because I was working at Microsoft. This was before I was working at Square Enix. Yeah, that's a good answer.
Yeah. All right. On to another question from Akshay. This one's a little spicy. What race/class would Trump and Biden play?
Oh my God, are you kidding?
I think I have an answer for this.
What the fuck? Okay, sure.
So from their perspective, right? This is not like, like if I was designing them as a character, right? Like,
Okay.
what would they pick? I think they'd both pick human paladin because I think that's what everybody who wants to be president sees themselves as, right?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Like maybe Kieran, not Kieran Tor. What's Jaina's? What are the fat humans?
Kultirin.
Kultirin, maybe Kultirin Paladin, right? Like if that's an option, right? Um, I think there's maybe an argument for like a wizard, right? Like if somebody thinks they're really smart, but I think both Joe Biden and Donald Trump see themselves as paladins. I don't think they're necessarily right about that, but I think
Is that true for every president? You think like Abraham Lincoln? You think Obama? They're paladins, human paladins.
Every modern one, maybe not Bill Clinton. And that's not meant to be like a slight, right? Like I think most people who go for the presidency view themselves as paragons. I don't think Bill Clinton did. I think he thought himself as like a slick operator, which I think is like a fine thing to be, right? In the chat, Arai says, "Wrong. Trump is rolling a female Belf warrior, and then not wearing pants." You know what? I can buy that. Like that.
I think Trump is specifically. I would go to subclasses. Trump is a retribution paladin. Okay, and it's like the most like a piece of shit DPS player you've ever met in your life. They only care about the parse, right? And then whenever the parse is bad, they constantly make excuses. That is just like, I didn't get my like that. He's like that kind of player. I think Biden is a tank. I think Biden is a protection paladin, and he likes the idea of like tanking dungeons, right? Like those would be my incredibly specific answers in WoW specifically.
No, I mean, it's from Akshay. I assume that it's supposed to be.
And I also think that Trump would be a female blood elf, and I think Biden would be a human.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
Or I'm sorry, a human paladin rather.
Yeah, I could see that.
Oh, that's actually really funny. Dan who falls asleep mid-run, an angry DPSer. Yes. Oh, he would be like Josh. Oh my God, absolutely. That's what it would be like, where he would not be responding to the ready checks. Yes, that's true. That's real. Okay. Okay, next question from my side. This is another Modic question. This is a little bit similar, but what podcast episode do you want to re-listen to?
So I have re-listened to the what's it called? The Force, not the Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, since we did a second episode on The Last Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I kind of want to go back, and I had thought about this at points in time, but never got around to it. It's like going back and like once a week listening to an episode from the beginning and just like, marching forward through time just to see what I was like 9 years ago. But I haven't done that. But I feel like some of those early episodes on like tabletop gaming theory would be interesting to see, because I think that's the place where I've got the most opportunity to have changed and been the most consistent in playing it, right? Like,
yeah,
I go back and listen to the episode on Fallout 4. I'll be like, that sounds about right, because I haven't played that game,
Fallout 4 has really stayed the same, but like, my approach to D&D, right, like is so wildly different, right? You know what I would listen to? I did 7th Expedition as a campaign pitch me, right? Wasn't it the first campaign pitch me I ever did? I would do that one. I'm running 7th Expedition now, right? Like the 7th Expedition is a game that I am in the process of running, right? And I would be really interested to go back and re-listen to that episode to see what the pitch was like and how much of it has kind of, been delivered. Because that was like years and years ago. That was maybe 5 years ago at that point. But now I finally have the opportunity to run it, and I am running. But it's being run in a way that I think is very influenced by other experiences that I've had, both in tabletop, right? Our Star Wars game would be a good example. But also out in like video games, right? Like 7th Expedition is informed by Baldur's Gate. It's informed by Kingmaker, right? It's informed by even Hell's Rebels, right? Like I feel like I changed quite a lot over the course of Hell's Rebels as a GM, and I'm carrying different lessons kind of forward from having run that game for however many years it ran. And so, yeah, that would be a good one. Yeah.
I would be interested also in seeing listening to the Elo Hell episode, because I think we did at least one of those, right?
Yeah.
See how I think about it now, because that's when I could see myself having changed significantly on.
It's wild. We did so many episodes on League of Legends back then, and now I hate the game. This is honestly the thing I've changed.
On League of Legends then, like we did on WoW, like we do on WoW now.
Yeah, man, we do on WoW now. Yeah, that's true. That's
we did like seasonal patch note, like reviews.
Yeah, God, that's wild times to think about.
Yeah. All right. Next on the list from Zhao, what is your ranking of all of the Marvel TV series? I think the only one I've seen is Loki. So Loki is number one. And that...
The Marvel TV... No, we've seen WandaVision, right?
Oh, right. We saw WandaVision. And I don't know if he wants us to count the Netflix ones. Because we watched some of those.
Yeah, Daredevil, Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones was good. The Defenders was bad. Luke Cage was okay.
I don't think I watched Iron Fist. Or
Iron Fist was dog shit. I did watch all of Iron Fist. Yeah, Punisher was okay. Yeah, man, a lot of these I have not. Cloak and Dagger, Moon Knight. I actually really.
I want to watch
Oscar Isaac,
too,
who I like quite a lot. Falcon and Winter Soldier, I never watched. Hawkeye, She-Hulk. Yeah, I never watched any of these. Yeah, my list is probably something along the lines of Jessica Jones has to be number one. It's Jessica Jones, it's WandaVision, it's The Punisher, Daredevil. No, The Punisher, Luke Cage, Daredevil, Defenders, Iron Fist. That's my answer.
Okay, I think I'm putting Loki on top, but mine probably looks very similar to yours after that. I just didn't WandaVision was all right. I think WandaVision was actively made worse by Doctor Strange and the Mountains of Madness or whatever it was, which is a shame.
Yeah, that's also that is so fucking true. Yeah. Wow, what a callback in the chat. Jessica Jones plot from a chat from an hour ago. Okay, next one from me. What do we got? This one is from Ray. If you could change any game/movie ending, what would it be and why, and what would you change to it? So we sort of answered this with Mass Effect 3. But I'm gonna expand this a tiny bit and say Game of fucking Thrones. Okay, you just have Game of Thrones. You just have Game of Thrones end good. Not hard. Game of Thrones end good. Fun show. Like
yeah, I mean, we talked about Mass Effect and good. Game of Thrones is a television show, buddy. I don't think that's in the question.
It's not in the question, but I'm answering the. You know what? Listen, those were movies by the end of it. Okay. Yeah. And honestly, I think it's just one tiny change. This is the change. Daenerys just sits the Iron Throne. Okay, Cersei loses, Daenerys wins. She sits the Iron Throne. She fucks Jon Snow or whatever. They have a fucking happily ever after. Okay, that's the change I would make.
She needed to die. Like she was.
Well, then what do you change? How do you change the ending? Do you just make it worse?
I think I'd
make her worse. I mean,
no. I think she's appropriately bad. I think it just needs to be stretched out and justified a little bit more. Like I think Bran needs more character development. Like, I think I think the cliff notes of the plot is correct. I think the meat on the bones is not, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I would disagree with that. I would say the cliff notes is wrong, right? Like, Daenerys was not set up to end up where she did in Game of Thrones. And so that's the thing that I would want to change. I would just essentially end the story where it ought to have ended, right? The Long Night should have been an entire season. Listen, I would have watched it. I would have watched so many more seasons, right? I was so all in on that show until like the very, very, very.
Do I have a separate answer for this? Do I have a good answer? I don't know. I feel like all the games that I finished I've been relatively happy with. Uh, like, and I don't think there's a. Is there a movie I think that really dropped the ball at the end? Have we talked about any movies that we thought dropped the ball at the end? Because I cannot.
But there have been a lot of them, but they're all very like minor. I think there are a lot of movies that do fall hard in the end, and I'm just kind of like, God, I wish this was better, right? Or there would be some changes that I would make to kind of like make the whole thing kind of play better. But a lot of the times, these are changes that are things in like beginning rather than things that kind of like basically, that like so. For instance, I think what would I change? Uh I'm trying to think of like what's like a movie that is like almost good that I go to bat for a lot. Maybe like Batman. What would I change in like Batman versus Superman?
Yeah.
I don't know. I like that. I like that movie too much. Like just earnest face, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of like I think there's a lot of movies that I thought were like good enough they could be saved by an ending change. Is the way to um that were good but for that ending. Other than like we've talked about Mass Effect and Game of Thrones, but I would change nothing about Your Highness except quadruple its advertising budget.
Oh my God, I know that. You know that game, the Mike Rose game. I'm sorry, I think it was Mike Rose, but it's the indie game. Is that the indie game you're playing right now? Because I know that.
No,
I know that game.
Sarian is talking about the movie.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought he was talking about the indie game. I'm
You
sorry.
mean the swiping game?
The swiping game?
There's that's called Rain, Reighn, I think. It's basically Tinder for rulers. Like you make decisions by like swiping left and swiping right on like cards that pop up. There's like 3 or 4 versions.
So it actually is quite a lot like that. It is you are playing like a king or I think it's called Yes Your Highness or Yes Your Grace, something like that. But it's published by No More Robots, Mike Rose guy that I know. Anyway, whatever.
in the chat, Rachel says, "Buddy, who are you in Mango in Sex in the City?" I'm pretty sure the answer to this is easy. It's whichever one maps to like Michelangelo for me, right? Because like it's like the 4 humors theory, right? Like the Sex in the City characters, the Seinfeld characters, the Ninja Turtles, they're all the 4 humors. And so there's Kramer is Michelangelo, Jerry is Leonardo. I think that makes Raphael.
George.
No, I think Raphael is Elaine. I guess that makes Donatello George.
I guess that makes sense. Donatello's kind of the butt monkey, right?
Yeah.
So do you know the Sex and the City characters well enough to make this answer?
I do not, but there is an old cracked video that like makes this explicit comparison, right? Like
okay.
Like they are literally sitting there and they're talking about Seinfeld. Like it's I forget the name of the series, but it's like Dan O'Brien, Michael Swaim, Katie, and I can't remember Katie's last name, and Cody. I can't remember his last name either. They essentially sit in the diner and they talk about something. One of the episodes is they're talking about like Dan O'Brien's talking about Ninja Turtles, and I think Michael Swaim's talking about Seinfeld, and then Kitty's like, "Oh, it's like Sex in the City," and then they talk about the 4 humors, right? Like it's
okay. I guess I don't know what the 4 humors as a baseline is, but I'm so intrigued by this like categorization system. I feel like the answer is I am Carrie, just because I have main character syndrome. And that would make sort of the most sense. You could also make a pretty good argument that I'm also Samantha, but like we'll just say I'm Carrie from the baseline. Ray in the chat says Mango is definitely Miranda. I think that's maybe right. I feel like Mango is Charlotte with like Miranda like cosplay basically. I just said to say that I think Buddy is Samantha. Yeah, well, listen, right? Like
So I'm going to put the link to this video in the show notes, but I'm also going to post it in the chat for anybody who wants to look at it. It's called
anybody
After
who
Hours.
wants to watch. Okay, well, listen, that's the answer. Okay, I can I like take like a 2-second break? I have to piss so bad.
Yeah.
If you want to read out and answer the next question and just ad lib for 2 seconds, that's okay.
Yeah.
Or do you want to take a break with me?
No. I'll ad lib.
Okay,
bring the camera
back and forth if you need to.
I will say no P only answers. If anybody in the chat has a question for me directly, I will happily answer it. The next question I was going to pull from the Rachel, this is your chance to jump on the podcast. Just like jump in the chair and start talking. The next question I was going to take from was from Paul James. Oh, there we go.
What's up, bitches?
How's it going? How's your first?
Actually, you're on like a minute delay. This is never gonna work.
Oh, can you? Oh, can you? Oh, because yeah, your headphones. Yeah. All right, well,
he took his headset with him.
So he's hearing this the whole time. Oh, amazing. But anyway, the question that I was going to go to next is Paul James. His last two questions were, what did you guys want from the podcast initially, and what do you have planned, if anything, going forward? Initially, so I will tell you, I think I pitched this initially to Buddy. My initial thought for the podcast was like, in my mind, the emphasis of it was going to be on like individual mechanics, right? Like, like the thing in my head was like knives in different first-person shooters all work differently. Let's explore that and talk about that. This is a thing I don't think we've ever done actually on the podcast.
Yeah.
But like I thought there was enough there to just talk about individual mechanics for a while. I think that's more better suited to like a video essay than a podcast format. Speaking of episodes we've done recently. But the thing that really started off is that like I always thought, okay, we should get like 3 people to do this. And then Monik and Akshay started their podcast. And I was like, you know what? Let's just fucking do it. And so Buddy and I started ours, and Monik and Akshay's ended after like 12 episodes, and we've been going for 400. So,
we have what's that, 50 times? We've looped them 50 times at this point. Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, this podcast for me became about people like Zhao, people like Lou, people like Jimmy, people like Rachel. Rachel's like, I actually kind of don't want, like, if the podcast were tomorrow blow up and we have 100 listeners, I don't think I would. In my mind, this is the podcast for our little friend group.
Yeah.
And I like that, and I sort of want, and that's what I want. That's what I want out of it. I know there's a part of me that feels a little bit almost like lazy, I would say. Like, I have a lot of friends who are outside of the podcast and don't even know about the podcast. When I tweeted, when I tweeted about it, right, I'm sure there were people who were like, "Oh my god, Buddy does a podcast." When I talked about it in work today, right, because I asked in my work chat, right, for like questions, people are like, "You have a podcast?" And it's like, yeah, but like it's for my WoW friends, for my college friends.
Yeah.
It's like, that's kind of like who this audience is. So that's a lot of what I want. I will say that I do have plans for the podcast, which is that we're going to do some Derps Talk About Food episode at 450. Okay. And I don't know what we're going to talk about because frankly, I feel like we've exhausted our food subjects. We did pizza, sandwiches, holidays. Like, what's another food topic that we can do?
Yeah. I don't think we can do anything else that's like, just like our hardcore opinions, right? Like, which is
well, you know what? We should find something else to make some Derps talk about blank, but like that we have a really crazy like opinions on that we just like never would mention on like the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Like
bagels is it's tough to get a full episode out of bagels, unfortunately.
Maybe you could do breakfast. I could do breakfast. I have a lot of opinions about breakfast foods. Number 1, it's pronounced crepe, okay, not crepe. Okay, you fucking heathens. All right.
Yeah, it's pronounced bad pancake because you want thick, fluffy pancakes. There we go.
Boo. Okay, breakfast foods is gonna be the next one. All right.
Look forward
to episode 450.
I would do a bake-off episode. That'd be fun. Although I don't know if
it would be so bad
for audio.
Like I've never baked like anything good in my life. Okay. It's on me. Next question. Next question.
Yeah, is there anything else I wanted to say about just real? I think I agree with you. It's good for to do this for our friends, but I also thought like I think you've had a couple of episodes that like could be valuable to a wider audience, right? Like, one of the episodes I think I actually liked the most is where I basically interviewed you about your job. I really liked that episode. I thought that was like good, and it was also like a thing that like you could like show to somebody else, somebody who was looking to get into the industry.
You know what's funny? I did a podcast episode about indification for like this was literally last week. The Indie Game Academy. It's like a place for indie game sort of developers, right? Like, and they were looking for podcast hosts or podcast guests, and they want guests to like bring like a topic or whatever. And I told them about Indification, and essentially like I'm sure we got listens on that episode. People were sort of getting into the weeds about it and all that stuff. That was obviously very like business focused, but yeah, that episode about my job is also wild because my job has changed a lot. Like we could do like a whole new one essentially.
Yeah,
because my job is now wildly different.
All right, well, let's move on. Your question then. Your
Okay,
call.
next one. This is Mingo Nishoba. What do you think is the biggest video game peripheral add-on failure? Easy. Listen, okay, I'm gonna hold on. I just need to say this really quickly. In a couple of weeks, there's a VR game coming out. It's called Hello Crew World. All right. Great game. Everybody should watch the trailer, play the game. It's very cool. Okay. Facebook gave me a bunch of money and I gave it to two trans people and they made a big trans allegory game out of it. And it's a really cool game. You all should go play it. Okay. And it's for the Meta Quest. Okay. It's a VR game. That said, VR. VR is the answer. VR is the answer to this. Okay.
So
I had a conversation that doomed me on VR so hard. Basically, kind of talked about how despite the price drops in VR, right? That over the course of the last however sort of years since Facebook acquired Oculus, which is what started off the Steam whatever it's called. You have the HP Vive or something like that. You have the Sony, right? PSVR, all that stuff. He said your audience with VR is 1/50,000th of what it is without VR. And I said, oh my God, does that mean that for every one, there are 50,000 people with with like a computer, right? For every person with a VR headset. And he said, yes, that's the numbers on the peripherals that I've seen. And and this is a guy who publishes VR, like their business is built on publishing these VR games. And I don't know that anything could do me harder, right? On a video game add-on or peripheral. I've said this before. I think the core problem with VR is a kinesthetic one, right? The inner ear is not built for movement in the way that a controller is. Kinesthetically, when I'm holding a controller and I press forward on a joystick, right, and then I swivel around a joystick for twin stick shooting, first person shooter where I'm manipulating the camera kind of abstractly and I'm manipulating my movement abstractly, that's a normal thing. But when I'm manipulating my camera directly, which is to say the camera is mounted on my face and it is tracking my eyes, right? And I am manipulating my movement abstractly. Those are fundamentally discongruous feelings, and I don't think there is a way that VR gets over that hurdle until you can make an omnidirectional trackpad. Like I don't see it. So at this point, I think VR is a representation of billions of dollars that have essentially kind of gone.
So I'm going to disagree, just because I think VR has enough. Like, it is already outstayed some of the answers I'm going to give. But I think that there is potential there, right? Like, and I think that like the way you solve the problem that you're talking about is games where you're like sitting in a cockpit, right? Like
Sure.
so like some of the best fun I've had in that stuff has been that. I also think VR has greater staying power, frankly, because of porn. There's enough there that like there's enough VR porn that like it's going to keep headsets alive until like the tech catches up with it in terms of like enjoyability. A thing that I think like, because like big failures still in my mind are the Kinect, because the Kinect is a very, very cool piece of technology. Honestly, might even at some level work with the VR thing to like make it work. But I think that I think that what's it called? That the Connect is the biggest failure because like there's not even any attempt to continue it, right? Like, there's we haven't had anything like it, and there's no like maybe, excuse me, the PlayStation Move, which should become a VR peripheral, I guess, but like it's also not really a thing. Lulu Chess's VR is a dream that reality can't match it, and I think that's right. I think that's also I think that's another big part of it, right? Like VR is enough of a dream that there's always gonna be someone trying to push that. Kind of like 3D, right? Like 3D TVs or whatever. They come around every 5 years or so. They try it and it fails. Um, I think VR is I think VR will eventually get there. I think there's like just other stuff that what like the the Power Glove, right? Like the Wii U pad, right? Like the Kinect. These are all things that have come and gone. And I think that they're bigger failure. I think the biggest failure is really the Kinect and the Wii U pad, right? Because the Wii U pad like basically locked an entire generation of games to like a specific console because you needed a second screen to play it on. And not an entire generation, but an entire generation for an entire generation of Nintendo games to a specific console.
Mm-hmm.
And the Kinect was a very promising technology. It's like got I think more academic use than it did practically.
I would maybe be willing to be optimistic. That so fair enough. Yeah.
All right. On my end, relatively simple question from Akshay: will you play the MGS3 remake? Sure.
Or I've never got done playing any Metal Gear anything, so maybe it's a good chance to get into. Maybe it's a good chance to get into it. My understanding of Metal Gear Solid lore is just like wild bullshit, but I feel like it's an important touchstone for I don't know, in the same way that I watch Sex and the City, not because I care about or like that show all that much, but because I want to understand sort of the culture. I would probably want to play MGS3 just to understand the culture.
Buddy X Snake equals memes undying. I think that would be funny. Metal Gear. Yeah. But that's an easy one to answer. Buddy, I think it's your question.
Okay, my next question. So this is another Jimmy question. Okay. What are y'all's favorite, most delicious dishes to actually cook? I don't know what actually is doing in there, but I have a lot of favorite dishes that I like to cook. I mean, we've talked about some of these. Probably my favorite dish to cook in like a true sense is like my quesadillas. It's like the most me cook like thing I can think about, right? Like the most me dish that I can think about cooking, because it's just like it's so simple, it's so straightforward. It plays to my sort of strengths and tastes, I guess, as a chef. Yeah, I will bring you a box, buddy, in August. We can make this happen. Listen, I believe this is Tanya, by the way, for my work, everybody. So yeah, I would say quesadillas. That would be what I think
of. Favorite to cook is an interesting question, right? Because it's not quite favorite to eat, right? Like it's the thing I enjoy making the most. And there, I feel like the thing that I always like that is the most satisfying to see come together is maybe like pasta Alfredo, because I make it like kind of like the correct way, right? Like bunch of butter, and you just like stir it until it like until the cheese emulsifies, and you've got like a cheese sauce. Oh, you know what? This is a better answer. Similar mac and cheese using sodium citrate, because you can basically like customize it all you want, and it gooey's up, and it always tastes so good. And it's a relatively simple thing to do. It's quick. Terrible for you, right? Like it's like a billion calories. That and Alfredo.
That's true. If like is that the answer you would give? Like if you wanted to cook something for somebody, let's say what first date, and you want to show somebody like you're cooking, like what does it mean for you to cook? Is that what you're gonna cook?
If it's first date, it's gonna be something high effort.
Oh, like fancy. Okay,
yeah.
I would make quesadillas on the first date, because I think that the quesadillas are the most representative of like me. Okay. As like a if I want somebody to understand me through the medium of cooking, it's gonna be my quesadillas.
See, I like cooking, right? I like high effort stuff. So like, I also don't have a lot of like regular things, right? Like I'm always kind of like, you know, like there's like this kind of recipe that's like it's kind of based on like, have you ever like done like orzo risotto style? Um,
Mm-mm.
there's a couple things in this. It's basically like you put some meat in the pan, and then you throw dry pasta in, and then you pour over a bunch of broth, and you simmer it on the stovetop for a while. Or like I like making gumbo in the winter, right? Like that's super fun to do, but it's also like, you know, I stand over the stove for like, you know, anywhere from like 10 to 30 minutes making the roux, and then I like fry a bunch of vegetables in it, and then I make like a giant pot of gumbo that I eat for like the next 3 weeks, right? Like um but I don't like, I just like expressing those skills in different ways. So
Mm-hmm.
like I make blondies a lot for my D&D group, but it's always fun to like mix and match flavors, right? Like I one of the things I think I was the happiest with, I made fall blondies with like pumpkin spice type spices, cranberries, I think white chocolate, and pepitas, and I thought that was
Oh
great.
my god,
Yeah.
that sounds amazing.
Yeah. Or like, you know, like my girlfriend is allergic to a lot of different things, right? So I like, she can't have macarons because she's allergic to nuts, and they're made with almond flour. I figured out how to make them with flaxseed flour, because it's like, it's essentially the same protein and fat content, which is the important part, and that stuff is cool to me. So, all right, on to our next question from Zhao. I sigh because I think he mostly writes these questions to torture us. What is your ranking of all 6 Star Wars TV series? The only one I have seen,
It's Andor the Mandalorian. I haven't seen any of the others, right?
yeah, I
No, sorry. Andor the Mandalorian, Obi-Wan. I like all of them. I've seen those 3, and I like those 3 of them. So
for me, it's the Mandalorian and the Clone Wars, because that's all I've seen so far.
in that order, that's your order.
Yeah, I mean, the
Okay.
Clone Wars' biggest problem to me is that it is a kid show, and it has a lot of kid show problems, right? Like, I've been watching the 3rd season, and it's like baby's first, like, you know, normie like left of center politics. It's like there's an episode that's like, it's literally like, we need to do more soldiers, and to do that we need to deregulate the banks, and this is bad, and we know this because Senator Amidala is against it. I'm just like, this is like no explanation here, right? Like, it's just kind of like, you know, these are bad things and you should hate them, right? Like, that's basically it.
That's okay. I don't know how to handle. You're telling me that that Star Wars, the Clone Wars, was making a
plot,
a regulation?
So the plot, it's the plot of this episode is that essentially, like, you know, Senator Amidala wants to negotiate an end to the war, right? But there are many senators who want to escalate the war. Most of them for normal reasons, that like the separatists are bad and we need to fight them. And
Okay.
it's like, well, we need to order 5 million more soldiers, and it's like, well, how we need to take a new loan out from the banking federation or the banking coalition. It's like, in order to do that, we need to deregulate the banking coalition, and this will put the Republic into debt, and the Republic will go bankrupt, and, you know, and we won't be able to afford social services anymore. And so Amidala goes behind the Republic's back to meet with the separatists to try and negotiate a peace, and then the separatists like do a terrorist attack on Coruscant. Yeah. And
you know, I don't know. I haven't seen it, so I don't know what to say. But that's wild. Okay.
Like, and like, I get it all, but it's just kind of like, it's a kid's show.
Is this like because you're an adult watching a kids show? You mean?
Yes,
or
but
like,
also
you think
if I was a kid, I would be like, what the fuck does deregulating the banks mean, right? Like,
okay, I understand. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Okay, well, that was a quick Zhao one. All right, that was an easy one. This is one from Monik. This one isn't real. It said, buddy, will you play test future vibe checks next month? Obviously is the answer. I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about that on the cast. I'm just going to say yes, cryptically. And then next down, what game opinion do you most disagree on between each other, specific game design or specific game related, and not industry related? So that's a complicated question. what do you think? Like, what if we fought the most about it? I would have said the sacred contract, but I opened this by saying that I think that I've come around a lot to the contract. Oh, you know what we talked about once? RNG. We talked about RNG. Do you remember this? I said that RNG is an important part of strategy games because part of being a good, you know,
Strategist.
Oh, strategist. Yeah, I was thinking tactician. I was like strategian. Yeah, the part of being an important strategist is being able to anticipate and like plan for like the unknown. You have to react to the unknown, right? A game that is 100% procedural, where there is no like level of randomness to it, right? Is like fundamental. Like a strategy game is like no level of randomness to it is fundamentally bad. Because it doesn't like test that feeling, I guess. Does that still comport with?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would have to go back and listen to the conversation because
I would have to, because we got to this point that's complicated. For instance, I think I talked about StarCraft, and because man, was I playing StarCraft at the time? I was talking about how StarCraft simulates a level of randomness without having any true RNG. Okay, there's no random number generation in StarCraft. It's like chess. There's no random number generation in chess, right? But the machinations of another person's mind are functionally random, right? And that's the part that is random enough that you have to be able to anticipate, right? So, for instance, in StarCraft, there are no critical. It's not like my Marines can't critically hit, for instance, right? But when I have a clump of Marines, the way those Marines shoot is too complex for any human mind to comprehend the math on display. That math is so complicated. And that math functions as randomness because, generally speaking, the Marines are going to shoot semi-randomly, and you have to kind of adapt to that. And we got to this point where that was sort of how we were finding randomness, which is in line with thinking, and along those lines we sort of tended to agree, but like you don't actually need true RNG to make that work, which I agree. Yes, I'm talking about something a little bit bigger than true RNG. That's my that's how I remember that.
That makes sense. So in the chat, Render Insane says strategy without RNG is solved, which I don't think is quite true, right? Like because I think about Street Fighter, which doesn't have RNG either, but like it's not like Street Fighter is solved. I guess like theoretically, if you could slow it down, you could like always make the correct decision. But you're at like the limits of the human ability to react to things. I feel like we're probably a lot closer on RNG than, because I feel like a lot of our disagreements were basically about terminology rather than about
like on the merits
implementation.
Yeah. I also feel like my game design sort of analysis has matured so much since we first started it. I was still working at Square Enix when we first started this, right? Like, when I look at my, the sort of what I'm doing now, essentially, right? I'm just seeing so many more games, and I'm testing so many more sort of games and mechanics and other sort of stuff, and it just kind of follows logically. My sort of analytical instrument in my brain is better. It's more honed, essentially. And so I feel like I would have disagreements with my past self on a bunch of stuff because I was just sort of. Wait, buddy, I didn't know you worked for Square Enix. Yeah, back in the day, that was my origin story.
Yeah, if you listened to this podcast for all 9 years, you know.
You have 399 episodes to catch up on, Tanya. Do not. I'm just kidding. Don't listen. That's wild, right? Yeah, but I was, because for the first 3 years of the podcast, I was still working at Square. Moved to Akupara right after that, right? And Jesus, it's just like
it's been that long. I was like, yeah, you moved over from Square Enix like 2 years ago, right? Like, Jesus Christ.
2019 was the year, because that was the year Mutazione was released, right? This is turning into an anime with a whole lot of filler to get to, man. Yeah, listen, yeah, true. I don't know. When have we had big disagreements on game stuff recently? Can you think of anything recently where you and I have really like fought on sort of like the fundamental game design of particular titles?
I mean,
what about Elden Ring? I shat all over Elden Ring earlier today.
Yeah, but like my view on that is just kind of like either you like it or you don't, right? Like it is a divisive game, right? Like,
yeah, that's true. Like I wouldn't necessarily say that I think that Elden Ring has bad. I think Elden Ring has bad lore. It doesn't have bad game design, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we haven't played a ton of the same games at the same time, right? Like it's been like WoW and like Darktide and Helldivers.
I bet you would disagree with my love of Total War Warhammer 3, though. You don't connect to Total War games in the way.
Yeah, but that's
connect to Crusader Kings.
Yeah, but that's not me. That's not me disagreeing with you. That's just like me, like not getting into it as much, right? Because the game I probably spent the most time on as like a kid was Total War Rome 2. I love that game. Or maybe it was Total War Rome 1. I don't know.
It was Rome 1. Rome 2 came out when
we were in college.
2012. No, right after college. I bought it with my first paycheck from Square Enix. I bought Total War Rome 2.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. But you know, and like every once in a while I'll go back to Total War and I'll be like, oh, this is fun, but it's just like won't suck me in the same way that that Crusader Kings does.
Yeah, because like in my mind, the thing that I get sucked into when it comes to Total War is the way the mechanics and the flavor coalesce. Right. You know, so for instance, like playing the greenskins or playing the orcs in Total War, you're playing a campaign that is built around sacking and raiding, right? Your economy is not built on buildings that go, you make plus 10 gold per turn. Your economy is built on buildings that say all of your armies faction wide make plus 3% gold from sacking settlement, right? And that to me is this beautiful marriage of the flavor of playing a rampaging, you know, orcish Wa and the mechanics of the game that are telling you, oh, you need money to do stuff, right? To raise armies and do whatever. You need to go out raising and pillaging, right? Whereas the design of the Empire or Cathay or something like one of these like quintessential kind of human factions, right, is all about building up your kind of like industrial sort of like base. You want to make big castles and then build, you know, industry in your big castles, and that industry makes you money from taxes every turn, and you defend it, and that's how you make your money. Or actually the Chaos Dwarves would, you know what the best example of this would be? The Chaos Dwarves are a fundamentally evil slaving race. They go out and they enslave the people that they capture, but they don't call them slaves, they call them labor, because that's how they think about it, right? There is a literally identical mechanic for the Dark Elves, right? But the Dark Elves do call them slaves, because when you're doing this as a Chaos Dwarf, you are thinking in terms of you are a, you know, whatever, capitalist industrialist gone mad, right? And the people who you are enslaving become the labor on which you are going to build your industrial empire. The Dark Elves are a fundamentally sadistic, oppressive race who derive pleasure from finding, oh, the lesser races, right? And driving them into slavery, right? They're both flavors of evil, but just like that little thing, just a word change, right? I think there's a lot of flavor and there's a lot when it comes to kind of like the role play sort of factor. I feel like that's like a kind of thing that you don't connect to in the same way when you're playing some of the Crusader Kings, right? You know, like Crusader Kings is about like the character and the story, and you can connect to that character and story. But it's like, I don't know, but maybe that's the best. Like,
yeah, no, and again, I don't think there's a real disagreement. That's just kind of like a difference in taste, right? Like,
okay, well, you know what, Monix, send better questions, buddy. We're having a hard time finding a good answer to this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure if we like dug down on something, we'd figure it out. But I think,
yeah,
I don't think it'd be about like game design itself. I think it'd be like more like peripheral kind of like associated things. Like, I bet you if we were still playing LoL, we'd have a lot to disagree about.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
Good thing we don't play that bad game.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Next one up. Cover is done. Back to Akshay. That's not a real question. He's asked me to recreate Techno Chocolate, which is a video I did when I was in high school. And then so the last question from Zhao. Another silly question. You two have done 400 podcast episodes over the last 8 years on a multitude of topics, but clearly this is just a way for you two to keep in touch, disguised as a show. Wouldn't weekly phone calls be much easier?
You know, honestly, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, Zhao. Okay, yes, a weekly phone call probably would be a lot easier. Okay, but it would be a lot less fun because this is a phone call you get to eavesdrop. okay, and then comment on later, I guess.
Yeah.
Danny in the chat, lol, what's that? No one plays that. Such a terrible game. Listen, we can all break free of the grip of League of Legends. All right,
Man,
I did it. You can too.
Occasionally, I hear it calling to me. I hear it calling from across the internet.
I had that thought the other day. I was walking up my stairs, and I didn't even remember, understand where this came from. I just haven't been connecting to games recently. I've been loading up a game, playing for 30 minutes, and closing it because it's just hasn't gripped me essentially. And I had this thought. I was like, maybe I should play League of Legends. Maybe that's what I. And I immediately slammed the lap shut close of my brain on itself. I was like, no, you can't come back.
Trent Immortal's back. Trent Immortal's been doing Beat League consistently.
Oh my god. What is the new Beat League format that he's doing?
It's he plays solo and he streams it and he edits it down for a video instead of trying to do a large production so that he doesn't kill himself trying to do kill himself trying to do highly produced videos. So
you know what? Fair enough, I guess.
Yeah.
League, no, yeah. You will give it time. It will happen. You shall see. You know what? I don't know. I did go back to play League because I was just hanging out with my friends, and it was literally you're gonna come play League with us tonight, or to hang out. That was in 2021 or something. And we were showing a new person in the game, and I was just playing Yasuo mid lane and absolutely dumpstering literal level 1 players, and I honestly felt bad. I felt sick to my stomach that I was just coming back to the game to be so fucking evil.
You know what's gonna happen is we're gonna get into we're gonna play what's it called, Project L, whatever the
2XKO, the
2XKO,
stupidest name in
now,
all existence.
Yeah, we're gonna play 2XKO. You're gonna play Yasuo, and we're probably gonna play Darius or something. And then there's gonna be a crossover event where you have to play a certain number of League games to unlock a skin in 2XKO, and we're gonna be back in. It's gonna happen, buddy.
God, that's actually probably real. That's actually probably right. They knew they could get me back with the Siren Song. Okay.
So Darius spin to win. No, so spin to win guy is Garen, who is also excellent. But in 2XKO, the only characters that they have showed off that speak to me so far has been Darius, because right now it's Echo, Darius, Yasuo,
Ari,
and
Ilaoi.
Ari and Ilaoi. And so none of the other ones, maybe Ilaoi, the archetype will work for me. But I fighting games in particular, I need to enjoy the character. LOL, I could switch characters and have fun. I cannot I need to I have in the past played multiple fighting game characters, but I really need to connect with them in order to put the effort in.
I'm divorcing you if you play LOL again. You know what? Listen, that's true. Okay. That's real, everybody. My marriage is on the line. Okay. Okay.
I'm just imagining you late at night, right? It's I need to get this skin, and it's Rachel opens the door, you just shove the monitor up. I'm not playing.
It's I tab away, but I tab to porn, right? Because that's better than League. It's oh, what? I was just watching this. I wasn't playing video games, right?
Okay. In the chat, real quick, Tony in the chat asked if Buddy plays Final Fantasy 14. I have played more Final Fantasy 14 than Buddy has, I think. And Buddy has worked on the game.
I worked on. Oh my god, porn is better than League. Yeah, I would rather my partner catch me watching porn than playing League of Legends. That's 100% true, right? Wait, buddy, do you play Final Fantasy 14? I don't play Final Fantasy 14. Because I worked on it. I worked on it for 5 years, and I can't I don't know. I was really in the nitty gritty of the behind the scenes stuff, and I just never could connect to. I never could connect to it. At a certain point, I will maybe feel like I'm far enough away from that. I talked to my old boss. I saw my old boss the other day. He and I had a really great conversation. It was really nice catching up with him. And I feel like at one point, maybe I will find my way to play Final Fantasy 14. I almost played Final Fantasy 14 during the pandemic, and then I learned that you can't play the samurai class until you get a character to level 60. Well, yeah. Fuck this. God damn it. I hate it here.
No, that was I have played Final Fantasy 14 4 or 5 times now. And it was always I want to try the machinist, but it's level 40, I think. And I finally got there, and then I didn't like the machinist, so I was well, fuck.
That's true. Okay, ain't that the way? Okay. Ray asks if you if you had one day to spend $1 million, what would you do with your day? I would give it to my dad. Like, I don't know. What do you what would I do with my day? If I had one day and I have to spend all $1 million and it evaporates out of my bank account. These have to be the rules. Otherwise, I would like
Yeah, I was gonna say,
literally
like,
give it
I
to my
purchased
father.
a broad-based ETF, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I put it in a trust and name myself as its beneficiary, right? You know? What would I do? I would go, you know what I would do? I would go eat like the best. I would take a private jet and I would fly to Paris, maybe London, New York City. Just like, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I would want to eat the best food in the world. Is
yeah,
what I would
I
want.
could see that. That would make
I
sense.
would want to go to, you know, whatever the best restaurants are in the best city in the world and eat the most expensive breakfast, lunch, and dinner, essentially. Buy a house, idiot. I'm gonna kill you.
I had to approve. I'm gonna kill you because that was.
It's like the moderator. That's the moderator.
But yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, you know, that's the thing, right? Like, if I'm going to be responsible with it, I'm going to, like, you know, invest it in a financial vehicle. If I'm going to, like, have fun with it, right? Like,
I feel like the answer has to be whatever it is goes away at the end of the day, right?
yeah.
Because otherwise the answer is I buy a house, right? But like but if the thing is whatever you buy with it goes away, well then the thing I'm buying is food, and that food that goes out of my tummy, like, I already ate it, right?
If the answer is you can't invest it, or you can't, like, you know, invest in a broad-based ETF, my answer is also buy a house, because that's the thing that will increase in value, right? Like,
yeah.
The
number one restaurant right now is in Barcelona. Well, guess we're going to fucking Barcelona, okay, buddy?
Yeah. Oh man, I would maybe go back to San Francisco and go to Smuggler's Cove and, like, drink all the delicious drinks there, and probably
That's iconic, actually. That's like
Yeah.
nostalgic even for me, and I only went 2 or 3 times when I was visiting.
Yeah. Go to fucking, oh man, there is a club in San Francisco called the DNA Lounge. It is the grimiest thing in the world. But on Saturdays, they do booty mashup night. And for years before,
I'm interested.
The years before I was in San Francisco, I would like, they put out a mashup collection every year, and I would listen to them on repeat. And then I realized that, like, that club was, like, within you know a couple miles of me, and so I would go, and I would get absolutely smashed. They had like raised platforms that, like, people would dance on. Once I got so drunk that I climbed up on one and I literally fell off of it. Like, yeah, best of booty. Yes, that is the.
Actually, you know what I would do with my $1 million? I have a great example, May. I have a great answer. I hear that there's a submersible company, okay, that will take you down to the shipwreck of the Titanic.
No, oh
okay?
God, we're going
And
back
I would want to go see the Titanic. That's a pretty dark joke. That's a pretty fucked up joke. Okay.
I was thinking, like, is that amount of money enough to get you a ticket on, like, Blue Origin or SpaceX for, like, space tourism? I don't know. I consider doing that.
I would pay somebody to kill themselves so that I could eat them, because I've always wanted to eat a person. Is that a better answer? That's like a more fucked up answer.
I would say I think the better answer is you pay someone to, like, amputate their leg, right?
Sure.
Like, or pay someone who the most ethical way to do this is pay someone who is already having their leg amputated to take their leg and be able to eat it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another one in case you miss it, trying to prove it's safe. You know what? Honestly, I would give it to James Cameron, right? If there's any person, he's been to the Titanic 33 times. If there's any person who could safely take me down to the Titanic, it would be James Cameron. And I could bother him with how much I fucking love his movie. Like that's how I would spend my $1 million. That's the best way for me to spend my $1 million.
Yeah, like, cause yeah, like, I think I'm going with the food one, right? Like, I don't particularly need to eat human, but, like, there's things that would be like that'd be fun, like Japan or, like, Europe, right? Like, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, that's got to be the answer. Let's keep trucking. I am out of email question. So what's the next?
Oh, okay. So I'm on you. Do you want to take Mingo? I have Mingo, Ray, and Jimmy are all
Okay.
from our DMs.
So it's Mingo. And was this which PlayStation generation had the best controller? I don't like PlayStation controllers. Is like the honest answer. I like my sticks offset. And so whenever I have to play a PlayStation, I like buy a third party offset stick controller to play it on.
Yeah, my bet was going to be I think PlayStation 4 has the best controllers. But maybe I haven't played with a PlayStation 5. In general, I think we get better at this stuff over time, right? Like, kind of my platonic ideal for a controller is literally like, this is the Xbox whatever controller, right? Like, it's been correct for almost 20 years, right? The Xbox 360 got it right, and they just kind of keep iterating in minor ways on that controller. That's all
like,
I really.
I think the haptic stuff in the PlayStation 5 controller is pretty cool.
I don't know anything about
the
that.
shoulder buttons essentially can have different textures to them. As you push them in, and like that stuff's neat. But like, but to your point, that's just kind of like that's a cool new feature, right? Like, but I don't have a better answer than that. All right,
the next one from Jimmy. What are y'all's overall takes on The Rock? What are your takes on The Rock?
I assume we mean the wrestler and not like
we mean the wrestler,
not like the Dome at the Rock or whatever.
The Rock of Gibraltar. Okay, yeah. What are your takes on The Rock?
Britain should never give back. No. Pax Britannica once again.
Yeah.
Thoughts on the prison? Yeah. Or the movie about the prison? No. The Rock, Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I think he's a little too big for his britches.
Damn.
I mean, and this is like, this is after like the blow up over Fast and Furious, the kind of Black Adam DCEU falling apart.
Yeah.
I think of the three big wrestlers in television right now, or in out of wrestling and in media, which are The Rock, John Cena, and Dave Bautista. I think he's third.
Wow, that's rough. He's third?
Like, I think I like Cena and Batista better.
You know what? Wow, that's wild. Yeah. I think my big take on The Rock is that I think he flanderized himself, right?
Yeah.
The Rock, when he debuted in a truly gorgeous picture, okay, a classic of movie making cinema, all right? Fast Five. This is his true movie star debut. This is where he transcends, I'm a wrestler who's trying to break into movies, right? And becomes, this guy's the real deal. He's the next Will Smith. He's the next Tom Cruise. He's the next whomever, right? Action movie star. It was Fast Five. And in Fast Five, he was serious business. This guy, he was a threat. He gets the only fuck in that movie, right? And he delivers it with such great poise. Every line out of him is a one-liner, and it has basically all been downhill from there. His breakout role is his best role, right? Which is the worst sort of profile for an actor to kind of have, is what I would say. And so, yeah. And I also think that at this point, not only is he too big for his britches, he is really sort of shown. I don't even like Black Adam. I went to bat for that movie, right? But the way that he really, kind of manhandled and his weight around, with a troubled studio, right? Like WB Studios is having a tough time and everything, right? Like, I think that's a dick move. And I think he kind of, I don't know, reaped the rewards of being that kind of guy. Tom Cruise gets to be that kind of guy. Tom Cruise is that kind of guy. It comes to him producing his own movies and everything like that. But The Rock just is not Tom Cruise, which is a wild thing to say. But it's sort of true.
Unfortunately true.
Yeah.
All right. What is it? Is it Ray's question next?
Let's just hit this next one because it ties into this. Jimmy says, favorite WWE wrestler. How many years have y'all shed about how many tears have y'all shed about John Cena's retirement? So of those three, right, Batista, Cena, and The Rock, you said Cena or Batista are better. Do you like Cena or Batista more?
As wrestlers, I don't really watch wrestling. I think the only wrestling match I have like watched to any completion was that one we watched at Mark's place.
At Mark's house? Yeah,
Yeah.
that shit was the greatest.
Yeah. But like I think it's got to be Cena. Like
Okay.
I think he actually has more range than
I also agree. Dave Bautista's in better movies, kind of pound for pound, which I like quite a lot. You know, he's in Dune, he's great. He's in Guardians, he's great. He's even in that Zack Snyder movie that I liked. You know, just that one Zack Snyder movie I liked. Okay, because I don't like any other one. Okay, Army of the Dead. He's in Army of the Dead.
he's
but
also
I think he
in Blade Runner 2024, right?
Yeah, he's in Blade Runner 2049. Yeah, like he's in
2049,
these great
yeah.
movies. I love all of those pictures, but he's always playing a minor side role, right? He doesn't take up too much. He is he's not a leading man. Side character, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think he does really well in those roles. But it is kind of emblematic of somebody who's, not. And he's also working with like really like the best, right? This is Denis Villeneuve, right? This is James Gunn, right? Like these guys are like some of the best modern sort of blockbuster filmmakers, right? John Cena, I think, is in he's in Suicide Squad. That's also James Gunn, right? But I just think that when he's in a picture, he has this presence on screen that's really unmatched. And he kind of does the Rock's thing but better, where he just kind of like looks like a weird, unreal kind of person. Like nobody is that huge and buff, but like John Cena is that huge and buff, and he does that thing in a way that is just great, right? And I really connect to it. So yeah.
Ray in the chat says he's in a movie coming out called Jackpot, John Cena, and it's an American comedy film directed by Paul Feig and starring Awkwafina, John Cena, and Simu Liu. That is I feel like that's like a coin flip, right? Like,
Yeah.
Like I think I'll watch it just because I'm curious, but like that could also just be terrible, right? Like
I remember liking Paul Feig. What did he did, or Paul Feig, whatever? What's his name?
Paul Feig or
what
Paul
did he
Feig.
do that I liked?
The thing I liked that he did was he made a show for Yahoo Screen that was like the only other show on there besides season 5 of Community.
Yeah.
It's called like Inner Space? No. Other Space. That's what it was called. I liked Other Space a lot. It was like a comedy Star Trek type show. Starred the Indian guy from Deadpool and the AT&T lady.
Okay.
And the villain from his Ghostbusters movie that no one liked. That was a weird show, but it was good.
Well,
Yeah.
okay. All right. I think our next one is Ray.
Ray. What movie game are you most excited for?
Wait, sorry. What movie game?
Movie/game. Sorry, movie or.
Oh, it's movie/game I'm most excited for. Huh.
Are there any big what big games are on the horizon even?
Listen, sorry we're closed. Okay. Rain
Yeah,
World,
yeah.
The Watcher. All right. Okay. Airframe Ultra. Little title called Airframe Ultra. Okay, buddy. Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question. What I feel like 2023 was like this huge year where
Yeah.
a bunch of big stuff really like kind of came down and crushed it, but there's just like not a lot else. I feel like also part of it, you know what it is? It's Veilguard for me, right? Dragon Age Veilguard. I love these BioWare games. I've been a big fan of Dragon Age Inquisition. Was great. I think it was my game of the year that year, right? There's just not a lot else like coming down the pipe. Assassin's Creed Shadows. I'm gonna play Samurai Assassin's Creed. That sounds awesome, but I don't know that I'm like super crazy like up for it. And I just like there's not a lot else that I'm really champing at the bit for,
Maybe Star Wars Outlaws.
Oh, the Ubisoft Star Wars game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like a lot of the way that that looks, and kind of their approach to stuff.
Yeah. Maybe what is it? Black Sun Wukong or something? That's the Souls like. I like Souls likes.
What's the Chinese one, right?
Yeah.
Made by the Chinese company. Space Marine 2 for Sarian. Space Marine 2, especially with the multiplayer looks. I've not seen any of the multiplayer stuff, but listen, I'm here for Space Marine 2. That's a banger. That I am interested in and I am on board for. Are they fighting Necrons this time? Isn't that right? Are you just like looking at like upcoming? Oh, they're fighting Tyranids.
Yeah, I'm looking at upcoming games and seeing if I can find.
Do you care about GTA 6?
No.
Do you care about Civ 7?
Maybe.
Okay, I am a Civ hater, even though I do. One of my best friends is working. So you know.
Maybe Hades 2 when it's in full release.
Okay. When they release on top of one of my other games, you mean?
Yeah.
When they come out of early access, you know, a Cryptmaster 2, baby, right? You know. There'd be a couple of early access ones that I would be interested. Valheim would be a good example, right? Like coming out of early access. I'm hyped for Valheim coming out of early access because Sarian has promised to play with me. Okay. The original time we played Valheim, we played on a server and Sarian played off on his lonesome. Okay. But we've all decided we're gonna make a big Valheim server together, which I'm very in the mood for. What about WoW? What about WoW stuff?
Yeah, I guess War Within. I guess that's the big one, right? Like,
yeah. I feel like I missed such a moment, and when it's finally officially out, it's Viking on. Yeah, true. We're gonna go pretty hard. Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff that I know of that's like in development because it's been like leaked but not official. For instance, we know that there's a Total War Star Wars game that I think is like awesome. I would be so hype about Total War Star Wars. I'm also so hype about Total War 40K, which is where they're planning to take it after sort of Hammer 3. You know, but like these are titles that are probably like 2027, 2028.
Yeah.
Very, very fine. So yeah.
Say Death Stranding 2, maybe.
The new Mass Effect, whenever that kind of like comes out, you know, like
maybe I'll check out the new Dragon Age. Honestly, the things that I have enjoyed the most are been the ones that have kind of come out of nowhere and I found myself enjoying. So
yeah,
I'm excited for games.
I was going to ask if there's a long-term Total War 40K plan in the world. Exciting, yeah. So the rumor mill that Total War 40K is sort of like the next big sort of flagship on this fantasy thing, but they're building a new engine for it, and they're doing Total War 40K and Total War World War One, which people have been calling Total War Victoria, but probably you can't call it that. And the idea is it starts in the Napoleonic Age and it goes all the way up to World War One, and they're both using similar tech because it's a little bit more about like ground, like skirmish invasion, stuff like that. And I just think that's so cool. The idea of makes me an extremely happy camper, and I'm very on board for it.
I am looking through stuff and nothing really calling out to me.
What about movies? Are there any movies that you're like big on?
I am actually kind of looking forward to Deadpool and Wolverine. Whatever they.
What about Dune 3? Are you gonna be a Dune 3 gamer when you know, whatever? Is it Messiah, the third one? What's the next book?
Yeah, but it's Messiah's the next book, but I don't know if they're actually going to go there. We'll see.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see it regardless. Because like there's a big time skip between Dune and Dune Messiah.
I think when it comes to the movie side of things, I am super into James Gunn's Superman Legacy, I think it's called, or maybe it's just called Superman. I can't remember what he's calling it. But I love James Gunn. I love the DC stuff, and they're going in a way that I think is fun. Because there's a bunch of sort of cameos. The idea seems to be that, and I don't know what you're doing here. The idea seems to be that there's a kind of like a superhero universe that already exists around them, right? And just kind of like walking into it, which is sort of a direction that we talked about, and I want them to kind of like take this where this sort of stuff is like commonplace and interesting. So that's maybe the only one I can.
Sorry, Charlotte, do not eat that.
Ow. Orion, you can't bite me. Are our cats mad at the same time?
Charlotte is like chewing on a piece of plastic that is on the floor and standing on the cover for the green screen. Charlotte, who has not appeared on screen yet. because she is more my girlfriend's cat than my cat. But do not eat that. Anyway.
Okay, the next one I think is coming from Mingo. So, what's the best class in World of Warcraft, and why is it Warrior? It's Warrior. That's the question. No other classes there.
So he actually said Hunter, and I have played both Hunter and Monk, and I like Monk better. But
I do like Hunter for what it is. It's funny. I actually think I might say my favorite class is obviously Warrior, but I feel like the best class might be something different. I just don't know what the answer would be.
Yeah,
I would really have to like sit and play a bunch of different classes and really like have a think about what I actually think is the best class, right? I have definitely played a lot of classes over the course of Dragonflight, but just like not to a level that I feel super, I don't know, super hitted. Paladin, obviously the answer is Paladin. I have played Paladin. I quite liked Dazanji, but I feel like the answer would not be Paladin. I don't know. I would have to really think about. I think I could make the argument for Warrior. All three specs of Warrior feel like they kind of tick the criteria for what I would consider to be good design outside of just being my favorite, right? I could maybe make the argument for Warrior, but
yeah, I don't think I play enough to play enough different classes to make a strong argument. But I like Monk.
yeah,
Every time I try something else, I end up coming back to Monk. So
I like press button. That's where we're at.
all right, I think next is a Jimmy question. For Mango, and I think you saw you got some Elden Ring achievements. But all your Elden Ring, what do you think of Shadow of the Erdtree? I have not bought Shadow of the Erdtree yet. I'm just not there yet. I played a heavy two-hand weapon that I kind of strength wield in one hand and a big shield, and just like counter hit. That was most of my playthrough.
I'm sorry, counter hit? What are counter hits?
So on certain shields, if I remember correctly, when you block, you can it's essentially like a light parry, right?
Yes. I'm sorry. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, the parry makes sense.
It is not a parry. It's slightly different than the parry because it's just kind of like a block, and you can re-hit. Parry is like timed.
Okay. So you're not just parrying with a shield.
Yeah. Counter hit. Guard counter. That's what it's called.
Okay. I don't know about that then.
Yeah. I think it's a. No, it's not. It's just on certain shields, right? Like you can block, or I think if you block the hit and it doesn't stagger you, you can counter hit. Or you can guard counter. And so the weapon art uses one that boosts your guard counter ability, boosts your stability. I think it's what it's called. If that's what you want to do. But it's
I mean, my immediate answer is katana stuff. Is just doing samurai shit. Where I'm playing Takeda Kenzo, and that's fun, and I had a good time with it. I guess you would call that a bleed build. I eventually got this Darth Maul saber that I really like, and I was just kind of going back and forth between the Darth Maul saber and the Nagakiba. The Nagakiba I could upgrade really because it just uses the regular smithing stones. The Darth Maul saber uses somber smithing stones, so it's harder. But they're both fundamentally bleed builds, right? Where you're just stacking up a bleeding your opponents out kind of thing, and that's fun. I then played a different build that was a true. I was like, let me make a different character, and I immediately just fell into making a two-handed sword wielding sort of heavy armor, but with just enough poise to dodge roll. Great sword build, which has been pretty fun. But I don't know. I'm using a great axe now. I got a rusty. That's what we're using. I tell myself I want to play a magic build, and I tell myself I want to play an archer build. But I have never actually gone into either of those to see what they're like. My understanding is that archery sucks. I said I wanted to play an archer build, and people were like, "Don't do that."
Yeah, the problem is that it's not super powerful, and also arrows are a limited resource.
Okay.
Although I think that some of the weapons in the Shadow of the Erdtree make it a little bit more viable. They're throwing weapons or weapon,
Oh.
like some of the weapons like make it a little bit more like a ranged attack a little bit more viable. Most of the good range stuff has been magic so far.
Okay, well, fair enough. Yeah, that's really where I'm at with Elden Ring. I don't know if I'm going to end up going back to it. I want to, in theory, but every time I play for like 10 or 15 minutes, and I just like get bored and switch to something else, kind of like I was describing before.
Makes sense.
Okay, back to Ray. What's next? If you could tell past you something, excluding betting or lottery info, what would you tell past you, and at what age?
I mean, I assume like being like buy Bitcoin at like in like 2008 is also
Yeah.
on the table. Um, but do I have?
I feel like I would tell past me that I would just brag. I feel like past me would think that I'm cool. You know what I mean? If I told my 17-year-old self that I grew this, I feel like that 17-year-old myself would be really excited about. That's what I would be happy about.
I think I would tell past me to playlist Heroes of North and League of Legends and pay attention in class more, and go to class more.
Oh man, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I did, I guess, make it my career, but I played way more than I really should have.
No,
You know what I would do? I would tell past me, like literally, like yesterday me, exercise more, because I feel like I should and I'm not, and I don't feel bad, but I know I will because I just like understand.
No, that's like I'm still big, but I have lost some weight, and I would have started that earlier too, as well, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think I would have told myself to play less video games in San Francisco and explore the city a little bit more. Although I can't tell if I just like didn't like San Francisco or if I just like wasn't putting myself out there enough. But no,
I would tell myself to be you know what I would really do? I would go back to myself maybe in like school, and I would just say a bunch of stupid predictable things that you would tell like any teenager, but I would hope that if I heard it from myself, because man, I was such an insufferable shit and I really did just need to like shut the fuck up and get over it. Like high school drama, middle school drama was not changing my life. My life was not all that hard or like like difficult or whatever. I mean, I just feel like I would give myself the advice any teenager deserves, essentially, and I would just hope to God that I would that I would listen to me.
probably wouldn't. Right?
I probably wouldn't either. Yeah, that's true.
Um, I would tell freshman year Mango to go talk to caveman Matt Rice down the hall about video games, which, for people that don't know, Buddy's girlfriend at the time lived down the hall from me, and I don't think we spoke at all freshman year, but he looked kind of like a guy on my hall named Matt Rice, and we just called you caveman Matt Rice from like far away. But yeah. Yeah, no, that was
you know what actually I would do is I would tell myself to actually play more D&D games. I feel like I haven't played enough D&D games, and there were a lot of opportunities to play D&D games where I just kind of let them go because like I wasn't ready for a commitment. Okay, that's a big thing that I would change. Is I would be much more about.
Would you play more Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay with Will Rates or whatever his name was?
I hated that guy. Yeah, I mean the answer is gonna be yes, right?
Yeah, I mean that's how we met, right?
The principle outweighs the fact that he sucked and they kind of sucked. I actually sort of think I could have made a really amazing. That game was a lot of fun. Like Abu Gabber went insane for that game.
Abu Gabber is the reason why we met, right? So yeah, credit to Abu Gabber. Yeah,
and yeah, I wish I was better about it. I wish I was better about some of this.
Yeah. All right. Next one from Mingo. If you ever entered GDQ, what game would you play? Game's done quick.
Oh man, that's a great question. What game would I play for GDQ?
I don't think there's a game that I'm good enough at that like is speedrunnable.
I don't even know. Like, what game could I possibly speedrun? It would have to be something that I've played a gazillion hours of. It would have to be like Hearthstone, right? Or like like Estrella. Maybe I could do a speed run for like Estrella or something.
I
Or
could-
yeah, that's what it would be. I would want to pick one of my games that I've played hours of. It would be Estrella, Zoetti, something like. Nobody's gonna have a fucking spin. Yeah, nobody's gonna have a world record in speed runs in like these Akupara titles. That's what I would go for.
Yeah, play a small game that like no one else has.
I did do a speed run. I did a speed run for Rain World. The Rain World community asked me to do a speed run, so I did a stream where I did a speed run on stream. It was like 2 hours and 17 minutes, which is like, twice as long as a normal speed run is. But I could have entered the time. Okay.
Yeah, what is my hours played games? Let's see. Sort by hours plays. Yeah, I don't think that there's a lot that I could put in here, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question from Jimmy is favorite pair of underwear and are you wearing it now? And I have to say, yes. I have these boxes that Rachel got me. I really like them and I I happen to be wearing them. I got up today and I looked at them and I said, "Oh, I'm so excited to wear my favorite pair of boxers."
Yeah.
Are you still looking at GDQ games?
Yeah, I was briefly, but no, I am. I think I am. Yeah, I. So I don't have like a specific favorite pair of boxers. I wear Hanes boxer briefs, and I have like it's one of those things where like some people like are like this is like the shirt or the socks I wear for the rest of my life. This like underwear is just like it's good, it's relatively cheap, and they last for a while. And every time I like rip enough pairs, I just buy another pack off of Amazon. And I've never worn a pair of underwear that I thought was so much better that I needed to like, change my habits. So,
Well, fair enough.
yeah. Yeah. All right. Next on the list is from Ray. What is one of your most controversial hot takes?
I have so many of these. I don't even know if I want to be real about. I have some really real ones that are like truly spicy, which I feel like is the spirit of the question. But I'm honestly a little afraid of saying.
Do I have like a really spicy one? I get like we already touched on this earlier, but I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with cannibalism.
That's pretty spicy.
Like
we've talked about that on the cast.
Yeah, I think there's like a level of like I do think you have an interest in your dead body after you have passed. It's like the last thing you have an interest in, but like from a property rights perspective, I think there's a thing there. But from I don't think there's anything actively morally wrong about it. Like maybe nutritionally, but not anything like actively morally wrong about it.
Okay. I think this most controversial one, we have talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but yeah, this is a very spicy take. Is like the Hogwarts Legacy stuff, right? Like I don't think it's transphobic to play Hogwarts Legacy, even though J.K. Rowling is like a massive piece of shit transphobe, right? Like I feel like this is a very nuanced thing, and I don't see people make this sort of argument, which is I guess what I like about answering the question this way. J.K. Rowling is a piece of shit transphobe, right? Like that's definitely true, but not every purchase that a person makes is a political statement. People make purchases all the time that are just about purchasing a good or a service for the sake of said good or service, right? There's nothing inherently. If I go to the grocery store and I buy a slice of bread, or I buy bread from wherever, it's not because I support bread factories or bread factory workers or anything along those lines. I just need some bread to eat, right? Like that's the basics of it, right? There are purchases that one can make that are political, right? That I think are inherently harmful in nature, and we could outline some of what those. At the end of the day, video game multi-billion dollar corporation is just like not going to translate in that way. I also think that the ethics that most people kind of talk about in relation to that are pretty fraught. So, for instance, there are talented, diverse, smart, interesting game developers who worked on Hogwarts Legacy. They had more of a hand in the game than anything that J.K. Rowling as a transphobic piece of shit did, right? And their work deserves a level of sort of you know I don't know, their work deserves an appraisal that is outside of her influence, because the reality is there are shitty people who all around us in the entire environment. I don't know. This is like, that's probably the most controversial take that I espouse the podcast, but yeah. Okay, so Lou says this is the argument that I'm fighting against. Any purchase is problematic if you dig deep enough. There are better ways to protest than sabotaging those poor devs. This is not about that, right? Just the idea that there is any level of digging at all, I think is a fundamental flaw in the argument. The argument is that there is no ethics to I don't know. There's no ethics to this. It is just, I need a thing, I want a thing, and that purchase has no level. I don't know. Statement, I guess.
Sure. No, that's
Yeah.
fair enough.
A quick question for the podcast. Can I never hear Buddy explain this argument again as long as I live? I'm so tired. That's very fair. I did get into a huge shouting match with a bunch of our friends once about this, where I just kind of explained this point of view, and it became just like a gigantic argument.
Oof. I've got a spicy take, and I know this will piss some of our listeners off because we talked about it before.
This is gonna piss me off. Okay, I'm gonna get mad. We're gonna fight on this cast. No, I'm just kidding. What is it?
It's like I think AI for the most part is good, and I think that I think there is the way an AI looks at a picture and draws from it is nearly kind of it's similar to a person looking at a painting and drawing, right? You don't sue a person for copyright infringement if they look at your picture and take inspiration from it and draw with it, right? It's not like if you look at the Mona Lisa and draw a picture of you in the Mona Lisa style that you're committing copyright infringement on the Mona Lisa.
Well, you also thought Undertale was good, Mango, so there's no accounting for taste, says Rachel in the chat. And I couldn't agree more. Okay, next question.
And in the chat, Mingo says it could be good, but it's yes, I will agree that that AI is not at it is not better than a real artist yet, but I think it'll get there, right? Especially for stuff that's not bespoke, right? I need to generate a portrait for a one-shot D&D character. I will use ChatGPT. I need to generate some copy for or a description of a room in a dungeon. I'll use ChatGPT, that kind of thing. AI has ruined Google. You know what? I can't talk about that, actually. So.
That's true. You can't talk about that. Yeah, I disagree with a lot of these AI. We talked about this on the podcast not too long ago. Yeah. I probably agree on some margins, because I wouldn't say I'm fully kind of lockstep with, what maybe the hardline anti-AI take. There's a pretty Luddite version of that take that I would not agree with, but in general, I am unenthused by AI and
No, I mean I think.
I had a really fascinating conversation with a friend of mine who works at an AI company, actually, that I think his AI work is. He is using AI to program. He's using AI to write programs. Basically, the idea is that he wants their company is turning English into a programming language.
Sure, yeah.
Where you write a sort of an English prompt and the AI generates, a program for you, essentially.
No, I want to have a whole thing about the Luddites. Yeah, no. Yeah, no, and every day in my job, I have AI autocomplete, and it saves me a ton of time. Just to be clear, I should probably say this outright. I work for Google. I cannot talk about Google as it relates to AI or anything else. But I will leave that there because I really can't talk about it.
Fair enough, buddy. Listen, those are some pretty controversial takes, okay, out of us.
Yeah,
I'm proud that we did not sidestep the question. Yeah, you said you'd answer any question.
Any question that won't cause me to lose my job. So, yeah.
What are some intellectual property rights that you know about Google that you could share with the chat?
Yeah, none of the statements in this podcast are meant to be an official statement from Google or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so what is next? From Mingo. What's the best Final Fantasy game? Crystal Chronicles is the only one I ever played.
My favorite is Tactics Advance for similar reasons. That's the only one I ever played to completion.
Yeah, fuck yeah. What's the worst way you could break your NDAs right now? Oh man.
Honestly, I think the thing that I actually know a piece of knowledge about to break an NDA is probably something from you about my NDA with Akupara. Just because I don't,
with Akupara.
Yeah, because I just don't think I know a lot of material information.
Yeah,
about,
there are a lot of secrets in my NDA that will not see the light of day, but I've probably told some of you guys friendly, sort of things, but yeah.
All right, back to Ray. If you could be with a celebrity, male or female, who would it be, and why is it Timothy Chalamet?
Oh my god, I would be Timothy Chalamet. I don't know. I guess I don't know. Are there any celebrities that Timothy Chalamet is just the celebrity that I'm most viscerally attracted to at the moment.
Yeah, I would say Sydney Sweeney's pretty hot, but that's the only thing that pops into my head, right?
Yeah, even that she's kind of hot in a diffuse way. I'm not personally. Do you have you ever had a celebrity crush before? When I was a kid, I felt like I had a bunch of celebrity crushes,
really.
Right? Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, Timothy Chalamet is the modern version of crush. Okay, Mango, that one sassy panda from WoW. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. There aren't too many there aren't really too many women who are piquing my interest in the same way these days.
Oh, you know what? This is a weird link in my head, but we were watching the Clone Wars, and this is not about this is not about a celebrity I want to be with, but one of the characters, seems like Hoka or something like that, is his voice why does his voice sound so familiar? It's Jim Cummings. It's Lord Walker Cho, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, I do want to warn you guys that we're coming up on the end. Okay, we've got only a handful of questions left, and not that I want you to prolong our torture because Mango has to get to sleep. Okay,
yeah,
but if you do have questions, yeah, you can put them in the chat. Okay, and we'll get there. All right. Okay, this is the last one from Jimmy. Since the start of the podcast, or maybe your whole lives, if you want to expand it. What's your favorite era of gaming? Nostalgia will obviously play a role, but I'm interested in the discourse. I think my favorite core era of gaming is 2008 to 2012. I've kind of explained this era before. Really, it is in my mind, it's bookended by Mass Effect. So 2007, late 2007, early 2008, to get Mass Effect.
Wait, say that again. What's the era?
It is 2008 to 2012. It's like
You mean the time when you were in college and you had a ton of time to play video games and not a lot of other responsibilities?
But I'm gonna make a real argument here, okay? Something that really changed the way that I look at games was this era, because yes, I was in college. I had time to play a lot of video games. I had a GameFly account and an Xbox 360, and I could play everything. And I went so hard. I played, Assassin's Creed and Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and this was Deus Ex Human Revolution was right around here. Mass Effect, Mass Effect 2, Mass Effect 3. Obviously, Mass Effect 2 is my favorite game of all time. It was just StarCraft 2 was right in this zone, right? It's just it was this confluence of a million games that I have such good memories of, just sitting down and crushing. Skyrim, right in this time. This to me is the sweet spot gaming era for a certain level of high-end AAA development. But also sort of budgets and release schedules were capped in a way. We kind of forget what this felt like, but Mass Effect, Mass Effect 2, and Mass Effect 3 came out 5 years apart, right? In 5 years, they completed that trilogy, right? Dragon Age took 10 years to get 3 games, right? And it's been almost 10 years since the last Dragon Age game. The last Dragon Age game was in 2016. The next Dragon Age game is in 2024, right? It's been 8 years, right? And I think that level of sort of expanding sort of ranges and timelines for when games have been coming out has really kind of hurt my ability to connect with some of these titles in the way that we connect with them. But that's kind of the nostalgia answer, and that's also sort of disassociating from like my real current answer is right now. Like that's like the true answer in my mind, because I kind of feel like this is the best games have ever been, mostly for like the indification stuff that we episode, right? That kind of the revolution of developers and the access that indie games have to the marketplace has sort of brought forth this just tsunami of good games and interesting games and more complex games that are being made out of love is great and better and all this other sort of stuff, right? I think that Assassin's Creed whatever is going to probably be better than Assassin's Creed 2 on the merits, but that era was when games were coming out frequently enough that I was playing so much of them. It just felt like there was always a new good single player AAA experience that was telling the interesting unique story. It's just like right in that time. That was a golden age of video games. I have very tragic feelings.
Yeah, and I think it was also right before like the big live servicification of a lot of games.
Yeah, this is Bioshock Infinite are in here. Dishonored is in here. And I feel like a lot of these titles, for instance, Dishonored 1 comes out, it's a huge deal. Dishonored 2 comes out, not as it just doesn't hit in the same way. It's just sort of like Skyrim comes out, it's the biggest game in the world. Starfield come out, and I think it's because kind of the gaming industry has moved past that sort of era of these like AAA single player experiences in a way. Yeah.
Yep. I don't know. My answer is always pretty consistently the present, because I think that like tech's always moving forward. Right to your point, I don't think there's an era of gaming that I thought that like particularly sticks out to me as something that like there are particular games that I like, but I don't think there's an era that like to me is like exceptional enough to kind of give me that feeling.
Even just like on a nostalgia level, do you have a nostalgia?
You do. Hold on, I need to.
Kill a bot, yeah.
Yeah. Do this.
I want to go back to before the reign of DLC. I'm old and grown. That's an interesting. I feel like now we're sort of out of actually, right? Like Baldur's Gate isn't getting DLC. Most of these indie games don't end up with too much DLC, right? Like a lot of indie pretty bespoke experiences. You could make the opposite argument, I guess, in the sense that like live service games are functionally continuously DLC driven, right? Any of the Paradox games are like this, right? Total War is sort of like this, but
yeah. I also think that part of the reason why we've got the rise of DLC is like video game prices have remained static, but like the cost of money has, beyond just budgets, right? Like, a game $60 today is not the same as $60 20 years ago, right? Like, yeah. And DLC is a way to kind of capture some of that value and put it back into the game without like, pissing off consumers by raising the price of a game. But that's just like economics, not anything particularly inherent to gaming. All right.
Okay, I think we're just down to Ray and Mingo for the final stretch.
What's your favorite guilty pleasure anime? I don't know if I have like it. It used to be Naruto, but I don't watch as much anime anymore.
Yeah, I also don't watch as much anime anymore. I mean, my favorite anime is Samurai 7. Have we talked about this on the podcast?
Yes.
I love Samurai 7. And it is a pretty trashy anime, but it, first of all, it speaks to my big loves. Number 1, Seven Samurai. Number 2, I don't know, anime bisexual like awakenings, I guess. There's like a whole thing where Kanbei and Kyuzo have this. The fandom for that show is like girls who get really into, is it yaoi is the boy love, right?
Yeah.
Who get into the yaoi pairing of Kanbei and Kyuzo because they just have the most insane sexual chemistry, which I also like, I guess, you know. I would say that is a trashy anime. I'm not particularly guilty of, but it is an answer that other people would give, I guess, for a guilty pleasure. So
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's I would say, like, to your point, right? Like, you know, I occasionally watch, like, or we did an episode on the first season of My Hero Academia, which maybe
Sure,
falls into this
yeah.
as like a kind of a base shonen, but I don't care.
Actually, you know what? I have a great answer. Okay, it's Avatar: The Last Airbender. All right. So, Ray's next
I
question.
actually do have a real answer, which is Konosuba, which is like
Okay.
it's like it is a it's a comedy, isekai, that, and is it wrong to pick up girls in the dungeon? It's like, you know, they're dumb shows, they got a lot of fan service, they're fun to watch occasionally, and they're funny.
Fair enough. The next one from Ray. What is one place you've always wanted to travel to? For me, the answer is Germany. I actually think if I like had to uproot my life and go, I would want to move to Germany.
Italy and Japan are my top two.
Okay.
Next,
Do you have a number one? What would you want to do and just discover the roots?
Yeah, no, like there's a level of like, I would like to go back to the land of my people and just like see what it's like.
I do have a certain amount of that for Puerto Rico, actually. You know, I want to go to like San Juan, right? Like, not that I could go see, for instance, like, you know, I don't know where my grandfather or my great grandfather lived or any of that stuff, but just like there's some level of it, right? Like they feel a connection to.
Sarah in the chat says Italy and Japan are also my top two, which, you know, Japan's slightly more
Uh,
appropriate.
honestly, Japan is another great one, but Japan is sort of like a cop out because I lived there obviously for a while. But yeah, I would also really quite like moving back to Japan. I think that, you know, if I moved back to Tokyo, I would be a really happy, you know, I would be a really happy gamer. But also I'm proud to be an American. Okay, it's 4th of July,
Yeah.
or what? All right, so I'm all about that red, white, and blue. Okay, freedom,
I would say, like,
liberty, or whatever.
domestically, I haven't been to Hawaii or Alaska yet, and I'd like to visit those for different reasons. I haven't. I would love to like spend some time in Zion National Park, in Utah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Australia is one that I want to go to, partially because I know a lot of people. I weirdly have like 1 million developers who live in. I've become very globally minded because of my job and everything like that. Like, it feels like I just like I like know people around the world. So like the idea of going to New Zealand, hanging out with Paul from Cryptmaster, right, is a great idea, right? The idea of going to from Cardboard Kings and Desert Child, and that would be awesome. Super into that.
Yeah.
I would like to visit your mom. Hey, oh yeah. Good. Okay. Next question. I'm sorry. You can ask one.
Yeah, it is from, I believe it's a Minger Nishoba. What game genre do you wish was more popular?
You know, I want to say 4X games, but they're actually like some of the most popular games out there.
Yeah.
What game genre do I wish was more popular? You know what? CRPGs. Which is a wild thing because obviously Baldur's Gate is like huge, but like I've been playing Wrath of the Righteous recently. And obviously I played Kingmaker a while ago. They did their Dark Trader game. This to me feels like I could play a gazillion of these and just really have a good time. And you know, I just wish there were, I don't know, I just wish there were more right now, you know, outside of Owlcat, outside of who are the Wasteland guys, do you know? That's a CRPG that people like.
Is it Hairbrained, or did they get shut down because they were the ShadowTech people? I think.
Yeah, they were ShadowTech. Yeah. Or Shadowrun. You mean, right?
Yes, yeah, that one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like it feels like there's I don't know. It feels like Baldur's Gate and Wrath of the Righteous, all these sorts of titles. I feel like you could do just 1 million of these. Yeah, happy, right? You know, where is my whatever modern day Knights of the Republic, right? My Warhammer Fantasy role version of, right? Like, there's just so many good ones, right? Owlcat just released a solid Warhammer CRPG. Have you played it? I really want to play Rogue Trader, but I have played a lot of Rogue Trader. That was actually one that I played so much in college. We used to play with Sam. But yeah.
I demoed it at Gen Con last year, and I named my character John Warhammer, and it made the dialogue all hilarious.
Very on my list, just no time yet. Listen, we should do it. That's what I want to do with that's what I would want to do. I have this fantasy of playing CRPG group game CRPGs like a D&D game. I think that would be super fun. You get together with your friends every week, and you play the next little 3-hour chapter of Baldur's Gate or Rogue Trader, or kind of like. But also at the same time, playing multiplayer Baldur's Gate was also harrowing, because one of the things about a CRPG is you're kind of keyed into playing it where you're in control of the whole party, but actually having to kind of negotiate with party members in a CRPG is wild. Shout out to my friend Josh, unrelated.
I don't have a strong answer for this, partially because there's a part of me that wants to give like a snarky, like, some game genre I don't play so that the normies don't invade my favorite genre. But like, I also mostly play normie games at this point, right? Like, it's not like it's not like the genre is the thing that's holding it back, right? Like, maybe character action, because we don't get a ton of good of those, right? We get like Devil May Cry once every like 10 years. What happened to good tower defense? There's no such thing as a good tower defense. That's a
what happened to good tower defense. I've seen a lot of good tower defense games actually. There are a lot. Tower defense is a pretty popular indie game genre. There's a lot of people who are doing tower defense stuff that is like it's almost always it's tower defense but roguelike tech builder. It's tower defense but whatever, whatever.
Yeah,
and they
all
just add
must die, right? Like, there's usually like what else was there? There's like Bloons. DD.
I've played a lot of Bloons, to be honest. That's a big guilty pleasure game, man. It's a dog shit game that I've played so many hours. I just really wish Candy Crush was more popular. That's fair. That's a feeling that I have.
There aren't enough waifu gacha games. Yes.
Yeah. Ray asks, "What's your current favorite food?" For me, the answer is crepes. I've fallen back in love with crepes because honestly, they're just like a really So my dad grew up. He lived in Paris for like a year and a half. And he sort of like learned to make crepes with his family there, and it kind of got carried forward. And I just hadn't really had them in like a long time. But just pretty recently it became this thing, and we started making them again, and they're just so nothing does that thing in Ratatouille where Anton Ego gets back in time to when he was like a little kid, right? Eating his mom's ratatouille. The thing that makes me do that, which is what I'm just defining as my favorite, is crepes right now. So it's gotta be crepes that are my favorite food.
Yeah, I don't like. I like a lot of variety, but like, I think it might be pizza still, right? Like, in my quest to be healthier, I have been eating a lot of like healthier things, right? Like, before with this podcast, I have a Ninja Creamy. I made a protein ice cream thing. It tasted pretty good. It doesn't taste exactly like real ice cream, but it tastes like 80% of the way there, which is good enough, right? Like, and so when I go back to Jersey, it's one of the times that I get to like let loose a little bit. And so I have pizza and I have bagels and I love it. And so I'm doing it this week. So I'm excited to have pizza and bagels this week.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. All right, and then last question from Minga Shoba is: you've had enough of modern life to fleeing into the woods, but what's the one thing that would miss the most?
Wikipedia, maybe. That's maybe like a too serious answer for a joke kind of question, right? Like,
I also
the real
don't think
answer is like
true, right? Like, how much Wikipedia do you need in the woods, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, no. So really, what it comes down to, like, the ability for me to just figure out anything ever by just going to a Wikipedia article on it is truly nuts, and I like love that about like the modern world, right? So if I were fleeing into the woods and I know to just like kind of effortlessly look something up and comprehend it, that would be the thing that like hurts me the most, kind of like on an intellectual or like philosophical I think the real answer would probably be like blankets. Having good, warm, soft, super, whatever, like manufactured fucking would be the thing I would miss the most.
I think it's video games, right? Like, I'm a software engineer and I do video games in my spare time. So, my computers, right? Like,
yeah. Wouldn't it be, oh my God, wouldn't it be 8-hour video essays on random topics? It probably would be video essays. That's a good answer for what I would probably miss the most. Okay, now we just have a couple more Ray questions. What are your biggest pet peeves? My biggest pet peeve right now is confirmation bias and like post hoc rationalization, which is what I feel like is driving everything in my life. I just feel like I'm constantly like destroying me, right? Nobody derives things from what we would call philosophically kind of like first principles, right? Or applied principles. Everybody derives backwards from the answer that they want, and then they figure out a good rationalization for it. And I hate so much of that. It defines so much of like the gamer backlash that I railed against to like WoW or whatever, any stupid fucking this stupid Gamergate 2 shit that's going on that I hate so much, right? Like all that stuff. This is all post hoc rationalizations. This is all confirmation bias kind of like run amok. This is the thing I wish I don't know. It just annoys me and gets under my such a way.
Sure. No, I don't know. Hangnails?
That's a good answer, buddy.
No, I mean, I've been having trouble with them lately, and it's been a problem. So there's the first thing that came. One of those things, like I can't think of anything else right now. I can't think of a good serious answer like Buddy came up with. So yeah. In terms of a literal pet peeve, my cats are not getting along, and one of them has taken to pooping on his mat to establish his territory, and that's a pain to deal with. That is a literal peeve with my pet.
What's another one for me? Ants. We have these fucking ants in our apartment that I hate them. And they're not even like swarming over stuff. They're literally just coming up through our door, going around the ceiling, and then going out through a hole in the wall and just like using our house as a shortcut. And I'm like, why? This sucks. Stop it. Right?
Fair enough.
Okay. Yeah. Next one from Ray. What are your biggest WoW predictions?
I mean, we did a bunch of these earlier from the War Within Climax.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else that falls in there?
Do you have any like tech predictions? I would like we talked a lot about lore. What about like game design? Do you have any like play game design predictions? We're going to the moon eventually. True.
Do I have any tech predictions? I honestly don't know, just because like it feels like WoW has to WoW gets like a graphical upgrade once every like 10 years, right? Like, and you can't like, there's a version of things where I would like a more kind of like action focused WoW, but like, the people that play the game probably just want to keep playing the same WoW, so I don't think there's gonna be a huge change up.
I think WoW is coming to Xbox. That's my big thing. Is that now that Microsoft has done the acquisition, WoW is going to become something you play on an Xbox in the same way with 14.
Controller support, I think. Official controller support, I think, will be real. That's an easy one.
Yeah. And the question is, how are they going to how is the game design going to react to it? I don't have a good answer for that, but we'll see. I think it would probably be bad if it reacted too kind of strongly to controller support, but hey,
I think tab targeting is just hard. Like 14 handles it well enough, and it's basically the same type of combat, so I'm not too worried about it.
Okay, and this is the last question. So listen. I'm sorry.
We've got one in the chat. What's the next big WoW heel turn and when? So I think that's a fair one. Who's next big heel turn? Do you think?
Aurelion is sort of the obvious answer, which I think is too easy.
Oh, you mean
who's the next big heel turn?
Light as villain, I think is like is that what you're thinking with Terralion?
Yeah, that's what everybody sort of says. I think maybe but I don't think I agree with that. I don't think that's I think the next big WoW heel turn is going to be Titan stuff is my bet. I bet we'll get it in the last Titan and it'll be Titan stuff. It'll be something like one of the Titans comes to I think the last Titan is not Azeroth. I think the last Titan is going to be a true Titan that comes to Azeroth and wants to do stuff. And the stuff with Iridikron is going to, like deal with that essentially. So my bet is that it's going to be something Titan related, right? Or
That makes sense.
right, maybe it'll be Odin, who's already kind of a bad guy, but directly we're working on the same side as him. Tyr, Thorim, right? Like we're gonna end up fighting. Like I have a thing that I think Ulduar is gonna be a raid in the Last Titan because it's in Northrend, right? Like the pitches that we're going back to Northrend. I think we're gonna do Ulduar and kill a bunch of the keepers. I think we're gonna kill Thorim. I think we're gonna kill Hodir. I think we're gonna kill whatever, and we're gonna end up killing like Odin and stuff like that. But yeah.
The final Titan will be the Jailer's twin brother.
Vozal, okay, is what they'll call him.
The final Titan is going to be Deathwing in Groucho Marx classes, which is like my prediction for the final boss of Dragonflight.
Okay.
All right. What is your favorite? Last question from Raylana. What is your favorite tech accessory? Tech accessory is maybe a little like how broad do we want to take this, right? Like
Yeah, I don't know. I want to say like my headset or something.
yeah.
Like I don't have any like trick to it, right? I have a wireless headset that has 2 batteries. Ray and you use my headset, right? And the thing that I can do is I can just the battery out and slide it in and then pop it, kind of back in, and I really love that. That's a huge thing, right? That I'm really into, but like I don't think I have a better answer for tech accessory.
Yeah,
than just that.
I've shown this before, but I like my
Oh my god, behind the scenes. Oh,
yeah,
look at that.
my hand claw for gaming is better than my numpad. So I am left-handed. I use my mouse in the left hand of the desk, and I have historically used the numpad and the arrow keys to control things. This is called the Cyborg. Let me get you the full name of this. It's like an Azeron Cyborg, I think. Yeah, Azeron Cyborg. It is basically a programmable keypad, and it fits your hand, and you can get it in a left-handed version. I think they 3D print it in like Lithuania and mail it to you, and it works great. And it works better for me than the numpad and the buttons, and it's a little bit more ergonomic. So that's probably it. Other than that, I listen to a ton of podcasts, but my headphones are not particularly special. They are nice ones, but I don't even think I need ones that are that nice. I have my Pixel 8 Pro came with Pixel Buds, and they work just as well as my fancy over-ear headphones. So I mean, it's a little broad for tech accessory, but I've been enjoying my giant electric ride-on mower to mow my lawn. I followed your advice and did the diagonals, but
did you?
Yeah,
Does it look good?
It does. It does. Front yard only. Backyard, I do different things, but that's the last question. I'm going to give 10 seconds, a couple seconds for somebody to ask another question in chat.
One thing I will do in the meantime is bring Orion up. Can you guys see him on the edge of my screen?
Yeah, I see it.
Orion, what do you want, little boy? He is so on my ass, and I don't know why. Because he just got fresh kibs. Okay. He's such a good little guy. I don't know why he's going so crazy right now. What's it like having a lawn? Good question.
It is nice when you get to use it, but it is it can be a pain to make. Like, it is 96 degrees though. I do not want to go out on my lawnmower. It's not 96 degrees right now, but I don't want to mow the lawn at 11 p.m. and I don't want to mow the lawn when it's 96 degrees out. So that's a pain.
I have such memories of just like going out to mow the lawn in the New Jersey summer and just coming back covered in sweat, just like head to toe, right?
Yeah.
But, did we actually feed him? Oh my god. Did I not feed this cat? The thing I did right before the podcast, I went out to go get fresh cat food. But you're right. I did not feed him. If you didn't feed him, then this boy is humgy.
Well, that seems like a great question to end the podcast on. If you'd like to ask us any more questions, we will answer individual questions if you want to send them to us in regular episodes. You can email them to derpsplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsplaygames.com. Follow us at twitch.tv/derpsplaygames. Follow us on SoundCloud, Twitch, YouTube. Actually, should make sure that nobody asks a question on the YouTube side. I don't think so. No one watches this on YouTube. Yep, no questions on the YouTube side.
On the Twitch side.
We've got a Patreon. We've got other stuff. You know, the links will be down in the description. That's everything I have. Buddy, you have anything you're looking to promote?
I have a big announcement on Thursday, but you know what? You just tune in, okay? Thursday. Take a look. I want to say thank you so much, everybody. 400 episodes,
Yes.
okay? I really loved sitting here and just like getting to vibe with some friends, even friends who, you know, like Sarian and Ray. I'm glad you guys came to hang out in the chat. I really appreciated all of the questions. Really, it's just I got a big heart in Ray. Real happy about it. So I hope you guys know that I really appreciate each and every one of you coming out, taking a look at the podcast, and having a good time.
I agree. And, you know, love to our new friends, but I do want to give a special shout out to Lou and Rachel, who have been here live in almost every episode since we started doing these live.
Also true.
To Jimmy, who I think is the single person who's listened to the most episodes out of anybody.
Also true. Thank you so much, Jimmy.
And, you know, I'll give a special shout out to Zhao, who, like, occasionally updates our IFTT integration so that our tweets go out automatically.
Yes. Okay.
Yep. Well, Baron, thanks to the casuals for making the thanks for the real one. Yes. But yeah, you know, we do this every week. If you like what you hear, next week we'll be back to relatively normal programming. We'll figure out what it is, and we'll have a podcast. But with that, I'll say until next time, dear listeners.
Okay, until next time, loyal listeners.